That was not love. I don't know what that was. That was trauma that was unhealed. For me, I started feeling like my world was getting smaller and smaller. I felt very suffocated. And the average amount of times it takes a person to leave an abusive relationship, do you know how many times it is?
I want to start with some lyrics that you wrote that just knock me for six. It's from a song, I Don't Belong to You. That's not how love should be. No, I don't. I don't belong to you. I'm no puppet on a string. I'm no slave to your bed. I've got my own life and it's high time I live it. The decisions I'm making, they're not yours to make for me because I don't belong to you. That really hit me, and I want to know, how did you come to the acknowledgement, or how did you realize that that wasn't actually what love is? Because there's so many people listening right now that are in that situation, they actually believe that is what love is.
I had a couple of relationships in my life that were abusive and toxic. One of them when I was 14. So when I was 14, I didn't have the vocabulary to understand, but fast forward to now, one of my good friends, Krista, she says, it's a really good question to ask ourselves if our world expands or shrinks when we're with this person. It's like a good marker. And so I think for me, I started feeling like my world was getting smaller and smaller. I felt very suffocated, and it was a natural instinct, primal instinct to want to like kind of push through and break through. But the question is, do I deserve to break through? Is this my fault? And am I able to? Those few questions kind of haunted me before I took action. I actually reached out for like an act of desperation, asking for help from people who were like in charge of taking care of me, but they didn't understand the dynamics, and it ended up becoming another layer of kind of oppression because they thought me choosing to be in this relationship, I brought those things onto myself. So I didn't realize while I was in the abusive relationship when I was 14, that wasn't love. It took me time to figure that out. And what helped me figure it out was 14 years after that of standing in my own way, not reaching out to the friends that I thought were the best, coolest people. I was like, oh, I'm not good enough for them. Like literally there's this, I tell Ellen Doby, I talk about her a lot because Ellen Doby lived on the same floor of me in college. I thought she was the nicest, smartest, funniest, most wholesome person I'd ever met. And when it came time to, ask people to room with them, like live outside of the dorms, live in our own apartments, I automatically thought, I can't do that. I can't ask Ellen to be my roommate because then she's going to see how broken I am. So if you have 14 years of that type of thinking, eventually there was a side of me, and I don't know what that side is, how that side survived, but there was a side of me that said, is this right? Like, do I deserve more? Like, I had the audacity to ask myself that question. I didn't know the answer, but I wanted to find out. And so that's when I started like, maybe I'll reach out to Ellen Doby now. Maybe, even though it's like 4 years out of college, I'm going to call her. I'm going to tell her, like, that's how I felt about her, but I was just too nervous to ask her to be my roommate. I'm going to try to make these amends. And then, bravery is like this muscle. And then I started like getting braver and braver, and then building better relationships with healthy, loving people. And I was like, oh, this is what love is. That was not love. I don't know what that was. That was trauma that was unhealed and just spilling all over everybody. And I still have friends that are in really harmful relationships. And my tactic now as a friend is to not judge at all. There's no judgment of where he or she is at. It's more reminding my friend that they have agency, they have choice. That's like the greatest lie, is we don't have a choice.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from? Like, do you think that that's just a belief system that we've adopted since childhood? Or do you think it is situations that we've encountered that then lead us to believe?
That's a great question. I think that like there are some people who can make us feel bad for feeling a certain way and will, or changing our minds, for example. Have you ever like been in a conversation where you had previously decided that you wanted to do X, but then a month later you want to do Y, and they're like, well, you said you wanted to do X, and it's like a whole inconvenience or something. It's like, but I'm allowed to change my mind. You know, that's okay. I didn't know it was okay for me to change my mind for a lot of my life. So I had to learn that skill, and I just have to grieve like, okay, I did have 14 years where there was so much that I just didn't think I deserved. And I hold all those 14 years with such like, that's my reason for living now, is like my purpose. And we are aligned in purpose because you literally have in your thesis wanting to serve 14-year-old girls. Like I was 14 when that happened to me. So this is like very mind-blowing for me right now. But my goal is to help people minimize that amount of time that they don't think they're worthy to.
Yeah, girl, like that haunts me to think. And that's why I'm always, every time I'm doing an interview, I'm like, what is the thing that we can say right now that is going to snap somebody, not to necessarily change their life immediately. It's never freaking easy. It took you 14 years, and I assume you're still on the journey.
Oh, yeah.
But like that catalyst, that freaking fire of lighting that match to let somebody know that there's a fire inside of you because it's been dissipated for so many years.
Yes. So the average amount of times it takes a person to leave an abusive relationship, do you know how many times it is on average?
God, 4?
7. Oh. So I actually recently just went through this with a dear friend who was in a relationship, and you kind of watch them go back, but you kind of have to just stay on hold and just wait for them to be ready. But she's left now. But it took a few times, and I had to discipline myself. And this is where Miley taught me. She was like, you have to just stand strong, no judgment, remind her she has choices. And if you start projecting what you think she should do all the time, making her feel bad about it, she's going to disappear from your life. And so
that's powerful, actually, on that. Even if you do want someone to help themselves, or if you want to help someone, not forcing them, but being there for them. But what about the other side? So you actually mentioned right at the beginning that you did turn to people in your life, and they basically said, like, it's on you. How do you, now looking back, when you were silent, because I do believe that that's what that was.
yeah.
How do you work through that silence? And then how did you find your voice, and what a freaking incredible voice it is?
Okay, so I'm going to say a few things that are a bit unexpected on how to navigate that silencing. So I think about heat, and I think about joy. Okay, so I'll start with heat. So in my body, when I encounter uncomfortable scenarios, I feel a heat. In my life, sometimes when I feel excitement, I feel a heat. I feel these things in my body, and I was after I got sexually assaulted, I became a floating head, right? And I just didn't have a body. I just couldn't even acknowledge that I had a body because it's too much. But then slowly but surely, my body started screaming at me, and I would get acid reflux, so that's heat, right? And I would get like tense knots in my shoulders. I would get migraines, and so my body's communicating with me. And so learning to read my body and the heat, and just to ask, I don't need to necessarily know what it is, but just be like, oh, my body's saying something. I think that is one of the very first steps of like helping to reclaim one's voice, is to actually reacquaint oneself with our bodies. And so the second thing is pleasure and joy. So when we found out that Roe v. Wade got overturned, a lot of my girlfriends and I were in mourning. But immediately what we did, we said, let's go on a road trip. And we decided to plan this joyous kind of road trip, because we were like, we can't let these systems take our joy, because what else do we have? So pleasure and joy, like these actual things of like, they can help us reintegrate with our bodies and remind us like, oh, we are full humans that deserve this. So I know that's like a big leap, but little moments of comfort, even like deciding to give myself extra time, because I used to tutor, I would like, instead of driving straight to my client's place to teach them, I would take the long way so I could go look at the ocean. Just like gifting myself like that, just starting these little gifts. And then eventually I started gifting myself of calling Ellen Dobie and being like, man, I thought you were so cool in college. I just like didn't have the confidence. She even asked me to be her roommate, and I said no.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's yes.
That's even worse.
That's even worse.
Oh,
Isn't that crazy? The amounts of limitations we put on ourselves like are insane. Like I think about like, you know, like it's like Alice in Wonderland, you know, she gets really too big for the house, she grows out of it. I think about that image all the time. Like I was containing myself in this little box, and so many people are doing that. Like walking around the streets, I'm like, who is actually living their full potential, or who's in their boxes right now? You know, I'm always curious about that.
Oh, dude, this is so powerful. I'd just like to go back actually to the heat and joy thing for a second. Because as you were describing, I was like, they're so powerful. And yet sometimes they seemed a little contradictory. So for instance, where it's like you were saying about Roe versus Wade, like I assume you're freaking pissed and you're mad and you're upset and you're angry. But that's your body saying it. But you actually chose to ignore the body's response and choose joy.
I chose to, so I'm so glad you brought that up because, okay, anger, I was taught to just totally abandon my relationship with anger. I'm in my 30s and I'm just reacquainting with what anger is because I was taught situation creates me feeling angry, immediately hop to reconciliation, forgiveness, compassion. So
is that culturally? Is that what you were taught?
I think, yeah, maybe, I wonder, is it culturally, is it my family, is it my gender? I don't know, but whatever it is, the special cocktail of my life has taught me to leapfrog over anger. And what it has done, and it made me vulnerable to a lot of toxic relationships. But now the anger, I expressed that anger, but I did it through creativity. So I think it's important for especially women and also just like any people who have felt like oppressed, like the LGBTQ community, like people of color, there's this importance for us to acknowledge anger. Anger is a really good, like, it's like if you look at a lighter, it's like that spark. If we keep sparking, it's gonna burn us, but if you let the anger just spark and tell you information, then you can take that energy and then put it into something constructive. So angry song. So I wrote We Won't Go Back, and I ended up opening it to my fan base and saying, like, a lot of us feel powerless right now, but can you write some lyrics and write this song with me? So my fans wrote a song with me because, again, choice. I have a choice. I'm going to choose what lyric I want to use to express how pissed I am. But it's not like this sense of anger to damage my own body. It's something that I put into art. That's why art is so powerful. Is like we can construct it into here. It doesn't harm anyone, and it actually makes something new. And it actually then can connect me with someone else.
Oh, that's so freaking powerful. I love your art, and then as you talk about using that for almost your healing. And you were telling me just before we started rolling that you were practicing on the guitar during COVID and just like one chord at a time. And that idea from a mindset standpoint is that is literally the thing that people need to do, in my belief, to make a change, right? Everyone thinks it has to be a whole overhaul or, perfection. But that one little drip every single day. And I heard you say like one step towards bravery. And you gave an example in an interview I heard where you said like, even being brave, just saying, you know what, I actually don't like that restaurant we go to every day.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about that, because again, when I go to the tools that people can use as they're listening, these little tools of finding bravery, to find your voice, to speak up, to leave that relationship or whatever it is, when people don't believe they can, if they have the insecurity or they're not confident, how do they start? Just telling someone to start doesn't help.
Right. I would say it starts with noticing, just like noticing, like, okay, when am I actually not speaking my truth? It could be like the barista spells your name incorrectly on the cup. And you're like, okay, I'll let that go. And then your boss like pronounces your cousin's name incorrectly. Okay, I'll let that go. Like, what little things are we letting go? Just noticing and not judging. Like that's the part where it's like, please don't judge yourself. Just notice it because it becomes information. It's okay. We all do it. I still do it, and I have to catch myself. But there are times where like I will go out of my way to like correct something, but do it out of my own style. Like we can all create our own style. You know, like we talk about fashion, like, okay, what are we gonna wear? What colors do I like? What kind of materials look good on me? What cuts look good on me? It's like, what kinds of words feel good coming out of my mouth when I have a confrontation? Like, So we can design phrases. It'll be like, hey, I know it's like not the most fun to talk about. Like that was a phrase I used. So I was like, it's not the most fun to talk about, but I need to talk to you about something. I started developing these like, it's just developing vocabulary slowly but surely, like how I learned the guitar, where I learned 1 chord a week. That's it, 1 chord a week. I think the gift of learning music has taught me, all my music teachers, every music teacher always says, slow down. Slow down. Everybody wants to be able to play the concerto or play that rock song, but it's like, you got to slow it down and just play 1 chord at a time. So in our lives, if we're trying to become braver, it's like, just allow yourself to just notice, and then give yourself time. If the barista spells your name wrong, maybe you practice there and be like, oh, actually it's 2 N's and not 1. Maybe you got a little nervous, maybe it was a little more time, but then like, the relationship with the self starts getting affirmed, and it feels so good. Like, okay, because eventually we can start trusting ourselves again. And that was something I lost when I was in an abusive relationship. When I got out, I was like, how do I trust myself? I let myself get into this position. So what was it about me that got me into this position? And then my relationship with self was just so decimated. And then with these little acts, it's like it's almost like I'm courting myself again.
No, I love
like learning
that.
to fall in love with myself again and building a relationship. And I think recently I'm starting to get a place where like we're buddies. Like I'll be hanging out with myself and I'm like, hey, buddy, Yeah. I have on my alarm clock. You can put titles on your alarms, right? Yeah. And I put good morning, bestie. Oh. And it's like the smallest little thing, but it helps me. I chuckle to myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a nerd. And also, I am my bestie. Like, I'm my bestie.
I love that so much because honestly, I have such a thirst for tactics and tips that I can use in my life because I have a cycle. So there are days where I feel really shitty. There are days that I feel very happy. I feel overwhelmed sometimes. I get hangry, right? So these are all real things that as women, or not as women, as people, we just have to deal with all the freaking time.
Yeah.
And so when you have to deal with these situations where maybe you're not showing up as your best self, what are the tactics you can do or use to implement in your life so that you can improve? And so what are those tactics? Those small little things instead of the big, go meditate for hours, go to a retreat. Who's got the time for that?
Yeah.
But the thing that you're talking about are the things that I think people who are listening right now can actually implement in their lives on a daily.
Yeah, the other thing I've done is I have an album. We can make albums in our phones. And so I screenshot messages from fans, but it could be text messages from family, friends that are just encouraging. I screenshot them and I put it into an encouragement album. And so that I can go into it when I'm feeling low, like I can go and just be like, okay, I'm not alone. Like people do care about me. I'm not like, because that's very important is like when we start having the illusion that we don't matter and it doesn't matter, then that's when things can get really scary. And I know that feeling. So I like to have these things that tether me back and be like, okay, no, Melissa liked that song or, just little things like that. That's, and breathing like daily for me, like meditation. There are times where I did like consistent meditation, 10 minutes every day. And there's been phases where I've fallen off, but I do just like even a couple breaths and I say to myself, Soham, which is I am in Sanskrit. And so that helps me. I just am. I am happy. I am sad. I am stressed. I am. And then just a couple deep breaths. And I do that with my audiences too when I play. It's really selfishly for me because I'm like feeling all this energy, but I have my audience take a deep breath with me and it's the best feeling ever. Just one deep breath. It's great.
Oh, I love that so much. And speaking of I am, I heard you say that you actually put your songs into 3 buckets. I am, I can't, and I want. Break those down for me, homie, because that was so beautiful. And again, everything you talk about is so on point for mindset on anything people are struggling with.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. If I were to take a bird's eye view and look at my writing career, in the beginning, like as I started becoming professional, I noticed that a lot of my songs were the songs that I won't, I can't, I don't belong to you, all these things, because I had to establish, I was trying desperately to establish my own space. It's like, like building a garden. It's like, okay, maybe we do have to put a little fence up so, the cute rabbits don't get to our lettuce, like things like that. So I had to create boundary songs. But without singing I Can't, I couldn't really think about like what I want. And that's the next step. Like, what do I want? You know, because there was a writer that like said, he's like, oh, I really want you to write your I Am song. And I was like, oh man, I don't even know if I can write my I Am song yet, because I haven't spent enough time thinking about my I Want songs. You know, what do I want? I don't know. Like, do I want to go to Arizona and like climb the Red Rocks, or do I don't know, want to go to Manhattan and be in the city? Am I a city girl? Am I a country girl? Like, I don't know. So I had to explore the I wants. And I want is a really energizing and magnetic place to be. The more I think about what I want and talk and pursue what I want, the more I attract those similar people who are doing the same thing. And it's so generative, it's so creative. The I Can't was very important for me. And it also helped me to connect with people who are also learning to defend themselves, to protect their time, and just say enough is enough, which is very important too. I think now I'm starting to integrate all of the sides and just be fully integrated, like joyfully full. And I think that's the maturity of a songwriter, and maybe artist, and maybe as a woman too. Is like, okay, there's going to be days that I know what I want. There's going to be days I know what I don't want. And there's going to be days that I know who I am. And there's going to be days where I don't want to know who I am, and I just want to be a blank slate and like and just let life teach me, you know?
So strong. So if someone was listening, if they let's assume they're not a songwriter, but what order would they put that in then? Would it be I can't, I want, I am? Is that the right order?
Yeah. I can't, I want, I am. That was for me. And maybe some other people lived a certain way and the order is switched around. But for me, I couldn't even think about what I wanted until I set the boundaries.
What up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now.
How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 Steps to Becoming Confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside. Yeah, it's fascinating because so I can't is very strong, because I think that once you start to dig in deep of like the things that are painful, you even said earlier, right? Like, how does this make you feel? So I think that feeling, normally it's like, oh, this doesn't feel good. So you can start to identify all the things that don't feel good and then assign those to the I can't. But I found very interesting that you put the I want before I am, because I would think in my head before I heard your explanation that, well, you can't necessarily know what you want in the future if you don't know who you are today. But actually, your way is super freaking genius, because what you're saying is, well, just desire. What are the things that make your heart sing? And now actually that tells you something about yourself that you may not be able to identify.
Yes, because pleasure and joy, desire, those are all great compasses to guide us. And I think when I think about social change, there are things that are difficult to talk about. And there's also the tools of joy and pleasure and desire. And when we frame things that way, I want a world where, you know, everyone has access to the same books. That's much more energizing than fighting against a force that's trying to keep books out of schools. Like focusing on the wants and the positives, we can attract people on the same vision, and then we can head there together.
I love that.
It's kind of like, I mean, you know how to do that because you've run businesses. It's like having a consolidated vision that everyone can go to. It's like once that vision is clear and everyone's on the same page of going there, it's like nothing can get in the way. You know?
Yes, but I think it's easier in business because you don't have your own emotions wrapped up in it. You don't have the belief system of that you're not good enough. It's like your business doesn't give a shit if you're good enough or not. Either you do or you don't, right? Either you show up and you figure out the problem or you don't. And so if you don't believe you're good enough, the business doesn't care. So, but with yourself, it's a very different game, which is why I always love to talk about mindset, because the business side of things to me can be binary.
Right.
But when you
That's
set a goal
insightful.
with your heart, right? I want to do this. I want this joy. And then all the flooding comes in of your belief system, of the expectations that maybe you've had when you were a child. Me being Greek Orthodox, right? You can't marry a guy who's not Greek Orthodox, right? You can't leave your country. You can't say, no to your dad. All these expectations may have kept me exactly there, even if I had said my goal was to marry this amazing man and move to America. So I'd actually love to talk about the expectations you have had set on your life. Obviously, being such an incredibly successful singer, I assume as a kid that you weren't necessarily, people weren't like, yes, you're going to be an amazing singer. Talk to me about the expectations that your family set on you and then how you broke free, because the breaking free is, I think, the very important part. And then if you don't mind also discussing your husband and your family dynamic.
Yeah, awesome. My family came from extreme poverty. My mom and dad have seen it all. Like, they both have seen poverty, and then they've seen great success, and they've also seen everything in the middle. And so my parents' desire is for me to be safe and to be okay. And so that's the foundation of all of it. All of it, of course, comes from love and their own experience. And I think me pursuing a profession that is based on art was just like mind-blowing to them. They're like, no, like, you need to do something with skills that can help people, and that there will always be a demand for it. Like, get into law, get into medicine, And I remember my dad, I don't know if he'll remember this, but I remember distinctly in our living room, he looked at me one time, he's like, Connie, there are some people in this world that are they see the world so differently that they end up deciding to live outside of the structure. And he was like, don't become that.
Oh my God.
And I was like, okay, Dad. Like, I was just hanging out, but it stuck with me because I was like, is he saying I am that? And I think probably, I think he noticed that I looked at the world differently, and that worried him. So I went to UC Berkeley. I was supposed to go to med school, and I was thinking of doing law school, but I could feel, again, this is the gift of my body. I'm so grateful. My body has led and taught me through so many things, because my body would make me fall asleep when I'd studied for like law tests, like the LSAT. And my body would show me, like, if I'm in the studio, I could go for 18 hours straight. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I do like working. It's just a specific type of work. So when I followed that, it was hard. It caused like some rifts. I've always been the one that causes like some rifts within the family. Not causes, but like I initiate these confrontations of dynamic.
Is that because you're going against the grain?
Yes, I'm going against the grain. Yeah, exactly. And so I think even now, the way I want to live my life and stuff is still something that my parents don't fully understand, but I know there's deep, deep love and desire to understand. The journey to getting there is just, I have to learn how to not want to change them, because that's what I wish for myself, right? I wish for my parents to not want to change me. So I need to just fully not want to change them either. And that's okay that they see me in a certain way. And it's kind of changed the game once I stopped like defending my stance and just being like, okay, that's what you feel and I love you anyway. It's changed everything. Now there's more questions of like, okay, who is this daughter we have? Because I'm no longer chasing, I'm going to attract. I say it every day, actually. Maybe that's my new mantra, is like, I'm in the age of attracting, not chasing.
I love that. Now, I've got a difficult question for you.
Please, yeah.
What do you think they would be like if you weren't successful?
I think there'd be a lot more conversations about me considering a more realistic job of waking up. I mean, that still comes up sometimes, you know?
Really? Like, what can you give on this music stuff?
I think they've let it go. I think I passed the mark like a couple years ago, and I've been safe of those comments. My mom and my dad did say to me, like, recently, they're very impressed with my my persistence, like, and I have zero complaints about my profession. It's really hard, but I'm never bored and I love it. Like I'm always learning and I feel very much alive and engaged and challenged. So my mom acknowledged that. She's like, I never hear one complaint from you about your journey and you're still doing it. So I don't know.
That's so cool. The reason why I ask is because the success isn't guaranteed.
It isn't.
Right? But the journey and the struggle is. And so any time that you're going to go against the grain with your family or expectations that you have, it's going to be difficult. And I don't want to pretend that it magically goes away once you get older. And so, me too, where my husband, white guy from Tacoma, goes to visit my Greek father to ask for his blessing to marry me. My dad said no. And so the past 20 years have been to prove my father that Tom was right and that he could take care of me, quote unquote. Now, the thing is that we've now been married for 20 years and we have had a successful company.
We have.
So the result is like, oh my God, my dad loves Tom now more than me. And every time I call him, he's like, how's Tom? Right? Like that's actually true. But it's through the success of the marriage. It's through the success of having built a business together. But what if I did get divorced after 5 years? And I don't want people to just stop only if it's going to be successful. Even if my marriage had failed 5 years in, I think it's important to remind yourself that you don't live for other people, that you tried it, you believed that that was the right chance to take, and it didn't come into fruition, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so they're like, the same thing with you is that I hear your parents like maybe are being okay now, but how much of that is in hindsight because you've done well? And so how do we stay strong in moments when they keep coming back to you? I mean, I still get my dad, probably not anymore, but even when I told him I didn't want children, he's still, when I said, Dad, we've chosen not to have kids. But being Greek Orthodox, he couldn't imagine a world that a woman would choose to not have children. So he would still ask me, even though I said I wasn't going to have any. So the constant pressures of family,
yes.
I was just wondering how you navigate those even as an adult.
Well, first of all, thank you for modeling your authentic life because again, it shows me what is possible and like makes the environment so wonderful for everyone else to just choose whatever they want, which is what I think nature intended is for all of us to just do what we desire, of course, with love and care. One of the things that has taught me the most in my life is my Tom.
Yeah,
so I was like listening to your podcast about like your dad not accepting your Tom. I was like, wait, I know that exact story. My dad also doesn't
accept your Tom.
Yeah. And we're still in process, so I'll be mindful of how I share the story, but because I want to respect my parents and their process, and I also cannot any longer silence my love for Tom and our relationship. I actually felt we've been together 4 years, and if people were to look at my socials, I'm just really starting to lean in because I was navigating so many different opinions all around me, from Tom to my family, mostly like my family, and I couldn't hear my voice anymore. And so recently I just was like, I need everyone to just give me space to figure out what I want and on what terms. And when I say that, it's about how do I want my family to now meet my partner after 4 years of not meeting him? What are the dynamics? What are the questions that I'm going to be okay with them asking him? Like, I'm protective of Tom. I'm protective of this beautiful relationship we have. And so I'm trying to figure out those dynamics. And I actually went on tour with Abby Wambach and Glennon Doyle on the Together Live tour. And I had fallen in love with Tom as Abby and Glennon were really pronouncing their love for each other in public. And so they were really encouraging to me about really just leaning into my heart and following that. But falling in love with Tom and then having my family not be able to fully accept him, and they're getting ready to open the doors of talking to him. And so I'm trying to understand what I want. So that'll be a whole journey for me, is like, what are my boundaries? But this process has taught me like to completely choose me and my path at the cost of disappointing my mom, my dad, my whole like family, and even maybe being judged or from the outside, like even accepting maybe they talk about our relationship outside of me knowing and maybe not talking about it well, like that's heartbreaking, but also so strengthening.
Ooh, what do you mean by that? How's that strengthening?
So it's strengthening because I have to live with that. And I still have to find joy every day. I still got to write my songs, still got to run my business. But to be able to walk forwards and to do this crazy thing of trying to love them regardless and accept them and be okay with it and love, actively love through action, ritual, and showing up anyway when they don't accept all of me. And I don't recommend this for everyone because I know there's some people who've told me like, they're like, my presence is a gift, I'm cutting it out if they can't accept. I also am navigating cultural lines that I'm not sure. I'm like, is this my culture that is making this really hard, or is this just my family? I don't know. And so the only way I can, or both, the only way I can figure out is actually engaging and showing up, which takes more calories, takes more time and energy, but I find it worth it for me to look into it. And so I'm working with my therapist on how much do I go there and give and how much do I protect? And so it's like this constant dance, and it's like the music industry. You never really know where you stand, and it's kind of like stressful and but also wonderful and filled with emotion and richness. And so I guess I'm used to doing this like dance a bit. And that's why I think my practice with joy and my friendships are so deep, is because I know what it feels like to have conditional acceptance, like what you're talking about. Like, what if your marriage, like, what if you two weren't financially successful? Like, what would that look like? Like, and so I approach my friendships with this unconditional love that I hungered for and hunger for, but I get it from my friends now, my chosen family, and I get it with Tom. Like, really practicing that. I feel like not receiving that acceptance has given me the gift of compassion. Because I can see it when other people don't have it. I want them to be seen and heard.
And can you accept it now because you've built so much confidence within yourself over time? Because I could imagine if you don't feel good about yourself, you have like tremendous insecurity. Doing what you just said would be almost like crippling if somebody rejects you.
I think that's a really, really good point you brought up. I'm glad you brought it up because that is like a key point. My confidence, I think my confidence built through my relationship with my art, my music. Songwriting is like a direct like thermometer of my wellness. Like when I'm really well and in my life, in my flow, my music becomes pretty clear. Like in my relationship with how often I sit down to write, how often I'm working on my craft. I view songwriting like a devotional. It's almost like a daily prayer that I go to. And because I've developed such a tight relationship, my songwriting is my homie. Because I've developed such a strong homie relationship with my art, I have faith in myself that I can take care of me. So I didn't have that faith in myself before, but then through this creative process, I've developed it. So I think we can write ourselves into existence. Like if we don't see it here, we can write it down. We can write the idea. Like you're writing stories, right? You're writing these beautiful stories into existence, and it affects reality.
I love that. And it becomes this like almost like reinforcing loop. So it's like you do the hard thing. Oh, I did the hard thing. You get into another situation. Maybe you don't believe in yourself, but you remind yourself that you did the hard thing, and now it becomes easier. And there's one story actually that I've heard of yours that I'd love for you to talk about, which I was thinking about how much you go back to this story as the thing, because so many of us have this. So like the imposter syndrome of feeling like, oh, you don't belong. Am I good enough? Should I really be here? And I believe you're doing this recording session with like this incredible artist. And you have like utter imposter syndrome, and you make an excuse to go to the toilet.
The toilet is a sacred place where we go.
Dude, I'm so
for
with
refuge.
you. 1,000%. I even literally no joke. I actually say to people, if you're in a situation where you're going to either feel embarrassed or overwhelmed or frustrated or lash out, go to the toilet. And I don't encourage people to lie, except for this moment. And I'm like, if you have to say you've got an upset stomach and you have to run to the toilet just to get out of that bloody situation, freaking lie. But I'm with you. The toilet is like the sanctuary. Sorry to interrupt.
It really is, and it's kind of symbolic, right? Because it's all the things like we wanna like hide. It's kind of like, but it's actually where the truth is. You know, the truthiest truth. Yeah. So. I'll say the producer's name, Raphael Sadiq. I was in his studio and I've looked up to him. I've loved his music for years and I was just so nervous. And I was like, I need to use the restroom. And I went into the restroom and my heart was racing. I was like, oh my gosh, Connie, stop. Like, you've been like doing this professionally for years now. Like, he's just a guy that's also very talented and like very established and also like made some of my favorite songs. And so I was like, okay, you gotta create something to trick your brain. So then I started singing to myself, ooh, I belong here. And it ended up becoming like a whole song that I ended up using to kind of like empower the AAPI community during that really intense period of violence against our community. But yeah, in that bathroom, I was able to remind myself, oh, I can trick my brain with these mantras. Mantras work like a charm for me. Like, they really help me. Like lately I've been telling myself, so that in addition to the I'm no longer chasing, I'm attracting, the other mantra I have right now is I am sovereign and I am safe. Because even years after being in an abusive relationship, I still have high anxiety. And sometimes like everything will be fine. Like, the house is fine, the weather's beautiful outside, I paid my rent, paid my bills, like I have a boyfriend, like I'm so happy, like, but I still have this anxiety and it's like almost this echo from the past. And so I have to tell myself, I am sovereign and I am safe. And I have to remind myself, I have to do it every day because that anxiety comes up all the time.
Are you finding it actually more now that you have, oh, I'm paying the bills, oh, I have a good relationship, oh, I have a roof. Like, do you always find it like more?
Yes. Do you relate to, like...
Yeah, I think it becomes like everything feels so beautiful now and you don't want to lose it. And the thing that actually helped me, I don't know if you've heard the quote, this too shall pass, the Taoist quote. I love that so much. And I used to always use it whenever I was down. Right? Don't worry, Lisa, this too shall pass. Now I start using it for the great as well. Yes. Because I think as humans, we hit these amazing moments and then for some reason we convince ourselves that that should be our base level. And so now our highest moments become our base. Well, there's nowhere to go but down. So what I remind myself in moments of beauty, I'm like, this too shall pass. And that isn't to bum me out. It's to actually just make sure I enjoy the moment. Because life is ups and downs by definition.
Yes.
So shit is going to hit the fan. It's not about if, it's about when. So
100% agree. Like, Brooke Castillo is like this amazing life coach, and she says, if you are going to pursue your dreams, you have to 100% accept that you are going to feel shame. You are going to feel pain. Like, if you want to dodge it, you're not going to pierce through. Like, you have to accept that that's going to be a thing. That's okay. Once I accept that, it's easier.
That's exactly what I think this too shall pass does to me. It's just the acceptance of that. It's not always going to be like this. Why do you think it will be? You know, and now when something happens, it's not like that. See, I knew this was too good to be true. And it's like people say that a lot. And I just think enjoy each moment for what it is, because life is about that. Like, if we can just accept it and just, because otherwise you're just going to die trying. Like, it's just going to be exhausting to try and battle or to hold on to what you think is like the pinnacle of your life.
Well said. I really love how you flip that. I'm going to use that actually, because I'm reaching some really special moments in my career, and I'm going to hold this too shall pass because and it be as a beautiful thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
it's a good tool.
So what are you doing right now when you have that anxiety?
I do, so there's something called energy medicine, which is like tapping.
Oh, tapping, yeah.
I love tapping because I'm such a physical human. I used to think I wasn't because of my abuse. I thought I was just a floating head, but I was like, oh my God, my body's really loud. I'm really grateful my body gives me a lot of information. So I do a lot of tapping, and I do breath work. Breath work is really like just breathing deep for 30 minutes, like guided online, just finding something that's pretty economical. There's like a lot of great breathwork teachers and stuff. But also just walking outside, just feeling the wind on my skin, because we're indoors so much that like sometimes when I go outside, I feel the wind on my skin. I'm like, okay, I'm alive, and looking up at the sky. Literally just simple acts like that just bring me all the way back so that I can re-engage. And I really like using heat workouts to energize myself. So like, that 2 p.m. slump, like I'll do 10 push-ups in the studio and I'm like kind of back. So it really helps me. I like utilizing gravity and my body weight to like leverage the energy that I need, because it's all there at our fingertips. We think we're tired and we should just rest, but actually when we're tired, sometimes if we do some jumping jacks, it just like immediately like re-energizes us. So that helps me to stay really grounded through all the ups and downs of the career.
And coming from someone where you just said, like, you start that sentence with, like, I used to be completely numb from the head down, or like a floating head, and then be able to talk about, like, the wind on your skin. Like, that's so freaking beautiful. And I really hope people notice that one sentence that you just said of how, like, it just shows and encompasses your evolution. Because that's what, like, I'm going to go back to, like, when someone can just believe, right? That's the first step. Just believe that where they are now won't dictate the rest of their life. And so to hear you talk in one sentence to go from I was a floating head and now I can feel wind on my skin is such an amazing...
That's true. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I think like it all started for me with a like audacious question, like, do I deserve more? Question mark. Like, is this all? Is this it? Like me just getting in my own way and just thinking I don't deserve things, or could I think otherwise? Because I would have well-meaning teachers be like, what is your biggest vision in life? I'd be like, I can't even think big because I'm struggling with my imagination because I don't feel like I deserve it. So then the question is like, do I deserve more? And that's a question. And I've always loved questions. I think questions are the key to a more interesting life. Like the more we shape our questions, like we can open crazy doors, crazy conversations. Like,
all right, so what if someone asks themselves, do I deserve more, but they answer it no?
Oh, then my heart breaks. My heart breaks.
Like, would you re-ask a question? Like, would you repeat a different question to get to a yes?
Yes, I think that's really wise. Like, for example, there's this woman, she said, it's like simplifying the questions. Like, this is like a different thing, but she was basically like, okay, I can't say that I love my body right now, but I can say I have a body, starting there, like ground zero, but for a question, if I was like, do I deserve more? Maybe it could be like, do I feel a restlessness right now? Do I feel this energy in me that's like, I need to find an outlet? Maybe it's that, maybe it's about what is right now instead of what could be. What could be feels like a little later in the game if we're still healing now,
Yeah. All right, well, how do you then build your belief system like you have, right, where you were young, you're like, I want to sing, I'm going to do this. You get a record deal with Atlantic Records. It's like, I believe you're the first Asian, is that correct?
One of the first. There's a collection of them. I actually don't know. I don't know.
But you're one of the
first.
Which is just freaking amazing. And then during your career, you decide to leave. Talk to me about that, where you have a belief, you fight through, you push through your family, the non-believers, you go hard, you practice, you get up every day to be the best, the dream comes true, and then you realize maybe down the line, oh, this doesn't fit or align with who I am now. How the hell do you make that pivot? Because so many people, because they've told themselves that story, you're going to get the record deal, you're going to get the record deal. They'll stay in that record deal for 10, 20 years, miserable, but they'll stay there because their belief system told them, well, hang on a minute, you've battled your family, you can't turn around and change now.
I felt like I was constantly like taking myself hostage. I'll explain. I signed the deal, then my brain takes myself hostage, like, oh, you can't lose this deal, don't lose this deal, don't lose this deal. Like, you don't want to be an artist has to leave the deal. And so, and then I would go and accomplish another thing, and then my brain would take me hostage in another way. It's like, well, you got to do it again. You got to do something great because you're gonna be a one-hit wonder. But whatever. And then I was like, I don't like operating in this way, because people would say, like, are you doing things out of fear, or are you doing things out of like love and intention and vision? I was like, it's definitely fear. I'm holding myself hostage. And I was like, I want to free myself. That was one thing, is like, I need to face the thing that I'm running from so that I can actually focus on what matters. Because if I'm spending all this time being scared that I'm going to lose this deal, like I'm going to create a situation that way. And what I realize is, like, in order to keep this deal, I need to be able to communicate with authority, with confidence, and with clarity on what I need and what I want. And at that point in my life, I knew I didn't have the tools yet. And so I had to leave and feel the risk of that. Because I do really well when I'm like, when there's risk, when there's like, I just do well with like high stakes situations. And so I kind of was like, I'm going to let myself feel this loss and mourn and grieve this dream I used to have. This is me going to my teenager self and being like, you thought this was the way, but it's not, and that's okay. And that's okay. We're just going to find a new way, and it's going to be even better, because I realized my personality, my interests didn't fit into what the company needed, and I also didn't have the tools to maneuver it. So I had to leave, or else I was going to disappear.
And as a creative, it sounds like you were being originally then driven by the fear, right? You were moving away from fear every time to try and get something better, and so fear was chasing you. But now it seems like you're chasing creativity.
Attracting. Exactly.
Oh yeah, you're right.
From
Not
chasing
chasing,
to
you're attracting.
Attracting. Yes. Yeah. And I think because I went viral, that there's a psychology that happens when I enter into the market and they know I've gotten something viral, they want to chase that moment. So a lot of chasing came into my consciousness, because I was on the street, it went viral, I'm just experiencing it, and then a company was like, we gotta leverage this moment, right? And so then chasing became part of it. And I remember thinking a couple times, I was like, is this right? Like, do we need to be chasing? You know, but then it became this thing that just, it was a beast bigger than me. You know, I feel like record labels are like a big, beautiful machine. And then there's an artist. The artist is the microchip. You put the microchip with the vision, the ideas, the songs, and then it can make the robot move. But I needed more time to work on my microchip. Does that make sense? And there's some artists who like already have their microchip ready and they're just like bloop, and they're just like, they do well. Like Lizzo is doing so beautifully with that partnership. And I don't know everything behind the scenes, of course, but there are some artists who are just ready for that. And I knew I wasn't, and I had to leave to figure it out. And so now my priority is my relationship with my art and my music, and learning how to communicate. My voice is my everything. Like this, I was put on this earth to honor my voice. And if I don't know how yet still to tell a producer, I don't like those beats, I want to change it to this drum pattern, that's my priority. You know what I mean? That's what is valuable to me. And I got into situations when I was in the system where I would even like, I haven't really shared this publicly, but I was in the studio with a really, really well-known producer, and I was pretty intimidated. We made great stuff together, but I was also really uncomfortable. So I would drink like so much whiskey. I would bring handles of whiskey and drink half of it each time, because I was numbing myself of the discomfort being in this fancy place, and then me not being able to produce because I'm a producer, and me being the artist and just sitting and watching someone else control my music. It was really tortuous.
So if you were to do that again now, what would you do?
I would, if I were to do it again, I love that question because I'm ready to answer it. Maybe like last month, I'd be like, I don't know. But now I would take the song we wrote, I would ask for all the files, I would produce it out myself, and I would come back with my laptop and be like, okay, can you help me make this better? Because I need my hands in the music. It's easier for me to work on the music because I know how to, than to talk about it and tell someone how to do it. But I'm learning to do both because I want to be adept, and that's part of using my voice too. But
yeah, like as you were talking, I was thinking that would be, you'd have to, be willing to let go of things and not always have to be in control, because I assume as a producer, that's basically you're the person in control, right? And so now handing it over and trusting somebody else can be very hard, especially if you've gone through so much to be there, right? And it's like, now you're putting your trust, in essence, in somebody else. And if you have trust issues, now that probably compiles it, which, no surprise. And then the other side of it is trusting that you actually can do it, and trusting in yourself, that creativity, that you can walk away, you can do it on your own, and then you can come back and make demands, beautiful demands, but still make demands, is huge.
Huge. So past me walked into studio and just read the environment, because this is also a survival skill of being in an abusive relationship. Walk into the room, scan the environment. What do you need to become to make peace with the whole situation? So now walk into the studio, state what I need and what is going to help me flourish so that everyone wins. It saves everybody time. It's more fun. I'm more engaged. So Metamorphosis, that song, I just released a song called Metamorphosis.
So good.
Thank you. And so that I had other producers work on, and my hands weren't on it. I was like, I can't do what I did at Atlantic. So I rented out a studio, I produced it myself, and then brought it to one of my friends who helped me like just tie everything up. And I was like, this is a really cool process. Every song's gonna be different, so there's no right answer, but it's the act of what I said before, is walk into the room and state and share what I need. And if I'm not getting what I need, ask for it and trust that it could come. Because that's what I think also gets lost in being a survivor, is that we lose the trust that what we need can arrive.
And then you listen to other people,
And we even lose the faith of even asking people because we don't think it's going to come.
Ooh. So how have you then, because obviously we've spoken about how you've worked through your mindset, but what about in those moments where, let's say, you have asked for help or you have reached out to somebody now as an adult and you get rejection? How do you handle that and not make it about you?
Oh, yeah. I think I've had the gift of being, because of the experience that I had with Quiet and getting to a place where I got so busy, people would ask me stuff for me to do stuff, and I would like lose track or something. And so I'd ask them, please like message me until like you hear from me. If I don't reply, I so apologize. I'm just like, I'm barely keeping up. So I kind of hold that example in my head. If I don't hear back from someone, I'm really working on giving people the benefit of the doubt. That's what me and my team are doing in our business. We're like, everybody makes mistakes. Let's give each other the benefit of the doubt. Let's just like assume the best out of people and not write these stories, because we're very creative people. We like to write scenarios, and I've done many a scenario. I've written many a scenario that isn't true.
Oh God, how many of us have?
Yeah.
What's interesting is I used to do that all the time, and then I realized I'm actually missing a piece. I'm doing it to self-soothe my ego because being rejected or getting a note stings. And so I kept saying, well, you don't know, don't make up a story, Lisa. It's not about you. But then I realized, oh, actually, sometimes it is about me. And I think, putting on blinders by pretending it's not always about me, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So, for instance, I reached out to a guest once. She's a good friend of mine now, so I can say it. Maria Menounos, the e-host.
Yeah.
So I used to be obsessed with her. She was Greek. She lived in America. Like, that was the thing. And I heard she was doing interviews. And so my team reached out, and she said no. And so in that moment, I was like, oh, it's not about you. And I was like, hang on a minute. What if it is about me? Why do I deserve a yes? Maybe I'm not good enough yet.
I love this.
And I was like, there's a healthy thought and there's an unhealthy thought, right? The unhealthy thought, if I told myself that and I was insecure, I think that would have been unhealthy for me. But I'm actually quite secure now in just having developed so many years of skills and how do I show up to being, in my own, to really feel worthy. And so in that moment, I was like, but why do I deserve a yes? If I haven't put in the reps, if Oprah reached out to Maria, do you think Maria would have said yes or no? Maria probably would have said yes. So it is about me.
Okay, yes, let's talk about that. So I totally love that, and I agree. Actually, I love how you frame that. That's so brilliant, because the way you frame things is so like you make it really easy for people to understand what you're saying, but it's actually like a pretty sophisticated practice in life is to be able to be like, okay, where's my responsibility in this? For example, like this documentary, I talk about my experience with the label. It's really easy to vilify a label, right? The big corporation, but actually I had a lot of responsibilities within it myself. What can I work on? You know, and I'm always looking at that too. Like, for example, yeah, it's like if I want to work with an artist I really admire, why would they say yes? Like, what am I bringing to the table to like help add to the magic? I love that so much.
And also, because I'm always trying to, what thought helps me propel me forward? Right? Because like, does this thought serve me? Yes or no? Like, that's kind of how I've now think about things, because it's an easier way for me to stop thinking badly about myself. Because every time that negative thought comes up, you're not good enough. Okay, well, Lisa, does this thought serve what you're trying to do or not serve you? It doesn't serve you. Great, let's get rid of it. Let's replace it with a thought that does serve you. Maybe you're not good enough yet. So now, one of my favorite quotes of all time was Steve Martin, the comedian, of all people, be so good they can't ignore you.
Yeah.
And so now, if I live in that mantra, you said you love mantras, I go, cool, I'm just going to be so good that Maria won't be able to ignore me.
Yeah.
And so for a year, I was like metaphorically, you know, Karate Kid waxing off and, you know, wax on, wax off. I was practicing. And so a year later, to cut a very long story short, I was on her podcast, she was on mine, and now we're really good friends.
That's so cool.
But now here's a little twist to the story, actually, to your point about the story we tell ourselves. It turned out in like an evening where I'm telling her, do you know you actually said no to me the first time? She was like, what? We figured out that her mum was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and she was diagnosed with a brain tumor all at the same time. And then I reach out and ask if she wants to come on my show. So the truth was, she told us team to say no to people. So she didn't even realize I'd reached out. But now going to, if I told him, what story did I tell myself when she said no?
So that's also, it goes to show it's like we are what we believe, right? Because you didn't decide like, oh, well, I don't want to interview her anyway. You had the attitude of like, how can I be better for her? Yeah. You know, even though like that wasn't even the story, but that you gained all these skills. So it's really cool how our mindset can dictate the quality of our lives, because now you have new skills and you're friends with her.
And the self-esteem part is such a huge moment of like when you get rejected, when someone pushes back, whether it's a partner or whether it's a boss or a record label or a friend, like no matter that situation, how do you respond to it? And when I look at your life, when I look at your career, when I look at how you show up every day, it's the fact that you just keep going. Like in all honesty, right? And when I think about what is the difference between people that are, you know, at your level that can comfortably now talk about your partner with such a smile on your face, talk about your career, talk about your family, and knowing where you've come from, it's that. It's the fact that you have gotten up every time you have fallen to your knees.
Thanks for reflecting that back to me. Yeah. It's like at this point, the friends who I've known for a long time, like I work with on my team, I work with someone who I've known since 2008. I like keeping like long, just good relationships, and we joke like we're still here.
Yeah.
You know, there's like, we're at that point in our career where we can see each other like, oh, you're still here. Nice. You know, it's an accomplishment to continue to show up with it. That's just enough of an act, you know?
And I've heard you actually say when you feel overwhelmed, you do something like you ask yourself, where are my feet? Like, talk to me about that. That's super powerful.
It's learning. It's just, I feel like the mind is such a powerful machine. I think as a leader, the mind sometimes can lead us astray because it is so creative and creates scenarios that aren't real. But the body is like a truth teller. The body's just right here. And so it keeps me really grounded and like helps me zoom back in, because when I tend to overthink, it feels like I'm doing a big zoom out and things can feel very overwhelming. So I zoom back in. I tend to try to ask myself, like, do I need to zoom in or do I need to zoom out?
Right. That's what literally I was going to ask you. When do you know the difference?
It's like when I'm a little too precious about my life, I'm a little too worried about a detail, my career or a personal relationship. It's like, let me zoom out for a second. It's like, oh, there's people who are like struggling to pay their rent. There are people who are really like navigating terminal illnesses. Like, I have it really good right now. And then sometimes when the news and all this stuff overwhelms me, it's like, zoom in to my feet. Where's my body? I'm right here. and I can do something to like give my body a little bit of rest. Like I have control over this. That, the big world, I don't have control over, you know?
How much do you practice gratitude then?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny you bring that up. The two words that I'm really surrounding myself with a lot too is gratitude and awe. Like I want to be like, okay, every time my Bluetooth works, I'm like, that's amazing. That's amazing. Or like every time like my wireless printer works, I'm like, she obeyed. She obeyed. It's so cool. Like I try to just surround myself. Because I remember being a kid watching like, you know, adults being like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like I was like, this is all amazing. You all understand this, right? Like this is mind blowing. And so it keeps me just really engaged and grateful. And so regardless of what happens, like say we release this documentary, I release new music, regardless, I'm trying to get in the practice of like gratitude. Because I spent my 20s being like really eager to prove my worth and prove my decision to my parents. Like I did this, see, like I succeeded, this shiny thing. And now I'm like, I don't know if that's really like contributing to the love in the universe. Like, so gratitude and awe, I like to walk around with that. And it just like, gratitude snaps me right back in. If I'm like, you know, like if I'm frustrated with something, I was like, okay, list three people who have been great to you. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, fine. I'm pretty blessed. No more complaints, you know?
I love the word awe. Oh. Like, I just love the word.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, just three little letters strung together. It's like the biggest and most transformative feeling.
I have a bit of a love-hate relationship, though, with gratitude.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So, because gratitude, I think, can be amazing. When you're feeling really badly or you're focusing on something that maybe doesn't matter, using gratitude to, like you even said, like snap you back is so freaking strong. But for me, the plan was I was just going to support my husband for a year and then we were going to make movies together. And so for the first year, I was a stay-at-home wife. I didn't enjoy it. I had no dreams or desires of being a stay-at-home wife. So I was using gratitude every day, right? So it's like, you have a roof over your head, Lisa, you know, like you should be very grateful. People don't have roofs over your head. You've got a partner that loves you, that's willing to go out and work every day and you can stay home, right? So the gratitude. What ended up happening is I used that every single day and that 1 year turned into 8 years. And so now, 8 years later, I was a stay-at-home wife and the gratitude had turned into, I don't love my life, I'm really miserable. But how ungrateful are you? You know, how grateful should you be that you've got a roof over your head? And now that gratitude turned into a toxic gratitude.
Yeah, oh, I love that you pointed that out. Yeah, because when it's like, when anything is leaned on as the answer, it becomes not the answer. It becomes maybe a toxic thing, like you said, because the acknowledging gratitude and acknowledging your desire for more all at the same time is cool.
Which is what I actually loved and found it fascinating that you put gratitude with awe, because I actually think that those two now go very well based on what I just said, right? Because now it's like, but you still got awe from magic.
Yes.
And like that is...
And something potentially more.
Yeah, that's...
And that's okay. I used to struggle with the fact that I would achieve one goal and I'd want the next thing. I'm like, when am I ever going to be satisfied? And then there is yes, gratitude can help me be grateful for where I already am. And also the universe is constantly expanding. So I am part of the universe. So I am going to be constantly curious to expand too. Like allowing myself both. Like, yeah, we're always like in the belly of a paradox somehow.
Oh, I like that bit. That's a song lyric right there. Surely something.
yeah. Write it down. Yeah, I'll credit you.
Yeah. So actually, speaking of writing, how on earth do you keep your creativity alive? Because so for me, I stopped doing my artwork for 10 years because I was like, no, all that matters is work, work, work. And we built Quest, which was amazing, but I let go of something that I love. I have a lot of my community that love to draw, I love to sing and write, but if they've stopped, even for a year, they're petrified to start up again.
It goes back to what my music teachers taught me was...
Ladies, ladies, ladies. I know sometimes you worry that you're not good enough. Trust me, nobody knows that better than me. I spent almost a freaking decade having my soul sucked out of my body, doing something that I didn't love. Finally, even though I was scared to freaking death, I decided I was going to go for it, and I've ended up building the life of my dreams, a life I couldn't have imagined, because I realized that radical confidence is being afraid and doing it anyway. I wrote this book for you with 10 no BS lessons that you need to go from feeling stuck and frustrated to doing anything that you set your mind to.
The slow it down, and just lower all expectations. I love lowering all my expectations, but having really high standards, if that makes sense.
Oh no, explain.
Yeah, it's like if I take this out, my brain out of my creative process, it actually works better. So let me explain. So if I use my brain to think about how I haven't created for a year, I can write lots of thoughts about that. I'm lazy, I'm not dedicated. There's lots of things my brain is going to create. Doesn't help the situation. There was this one time in the studio, I was like so tired, I didn't want to do it, but I was like, I gotta go. I want to be devoted. I was like, I'm just going to turn the computer on and just open the software. That's it. I'm just going to open the software and look at it. That's my job for today. And I went there, I looked at it, and then I played around a little bit, didn't do too much, but then it kind of like built that trust. So I have a dancer friend. She's one of my dearest friends. Her name's Kylie Shea, and she goes to the studio to train every day. But she has days where she doesn't want to go, so she'll just go. And she's like, I just like walked around the studio and did swan arms. She just did this. She just walked in circles and did this, and like talked to her friends on the phone. And she's like, I showed up. It's just kind of like lower the expectations when we're developing a relationship. It's like romance, right? We don't go in like, we're going to get married on our first date. It's like, no, you're going to have a cup of tea and you're going to talk about, I don't know, like what color you like or something. And then you build. And so then when we build, then my standards of what we build as we get there will be high, because I love like challenging myself. Like no detail is too small. That's like something that the founder of North Face says, like no detail is too small. And I love using that. So does that make sense?
Yeah, because what I was wondering is, because on your bad days, right? Because I assume you have bad days just like anybody else. When you feel terrible, maybe your voice isn't great, maybe you're kind of sucking and you're trying to write a rhythm and it doesn't come together. The story you may tell yourself is, oh, you've lost it. You're no good anymore, right? Like that. Yeah. You had that one hit or whatever, that 3 hits. You had the 10, right? But the story you make up can come rushing back in those moments.
Yes.
So how do you make sure that doesn't then stop you and that you don't dive into it? It's that, right? The little steps.
Yes, and there's a little thing that I learned that is not a little thing, it's a big thing. It's 3 phases to creativity. First step, create like a child. Second step, refine like a scientist. Third step, surrender like a warrior. And so first step, create like a child. Have fun. Like when I was in the studio with Raphael Sadiq and I went to the bathroom, I was like, oh my God. And then finally I was like, okay, stop. And I remember sitting back down. Raphael's gonna be like, man, she went through so many things without me.
I have no idea.
Yeah. So I was sitting in the studio and I was like, I gotta write the best song. This is Raphael Sadiq. And I have like the computer on. I'm like, I'm gonna construct it. And I was like, oh no, I'm using my head too much. I was like, stop. Have fun, create like a child, put the computer down, closed it, and then listened to the guitar he was playing and just danced. And then the song started coming out. And I was like, don't doubt any of it. Just let it all come out. Let it all come out. Don't edit. Next phase, let the magic dance, and swirl and come in. And then the next phase, the next day, edit. Next day, edit more. Next day, edit more if you need. And then eventually we got to just release it.
And the warrior in you is believing that you're brave enough to let it out to the world.
Brave enough to let it out, whatever people may say, trusting that it's going to reach whoever it's going to reach. Like, I've done my job and I need to have the discipline to not try to fix it or try to like take the song back and make more edits. No, it's done. Let it be out there. I mean, art is never done and it's abandoned. It's just like get out there.
That's so true.
Yeah. And so those 3 phases. So I would say, how do we become children? And I think it's less of this. I think it's less of this, more body, more heart, more gut, and then editing.
Oh God.
later.
Yeah, I love that step. And then so once you've left it and you're let it out and you're the warrior now, how do you make sure that you're not holding yourself to external validation? Because of course you do it, right? Because there's no pretense. You want it to be the best. And so whether someone's right now listening and they're an artist or anything else, anytime you try anything, if you fail, there is that risk that if you don't get the external validation, you make it about you. And again, now you spiral back into you're not good enough again. So how do you deal with those situations?
I need first like develop a understanding with the word success and fail. Ooh. I'm like, okay, what is success for this situation? What is fail for this situation? Most of the time, the fail for me is not doing it, right? The fail is if I just abandon. But if I end up doing it and facing it, then that's okay. So I didn't fail. Maybe it doesn't meet my secret hopes that I keep stored away in a little cubby. It's like, oh, I hope it could do this. But also, it is what it's going to be. And it's also taking responsibility, right? It's like, okay, like, I'm curious. Why didn't that song hit? But why did this song hit? It's like, I just want more information and then keep doing it, you know, and keep writing. Like I could keep writing song after song after song. Like I don't have to be so precious about one song. And I think as new creatives, when we create like our first EP, it's like so precious. Everything matters. Like, but it's like, okay, good. Get to the point where you're too busy to wonder how many streams there are, or like too, not busy, but too activated by something else. Like continue learning, you know? Because I always joke, I was like, man, in 6th grade, I chose to join choir and I avoided like soccer team because there's a big scoreboard with numbers telling me how I do in soccer.
Oh, interesting.
And then now there's Spotify.
I know, yeah. Like you've literally chosen a profession where the big numbers are right there for the entire world to see.
Everybody to see. I was like, wait, what is this joke? I thought this is all subjective. But anyways, yeah. So
But that's the hard thing, especially when it comes to art, right? Because it is subjective.
it really is. And it's it's hard. It's really hard. I don't envy the modern day artists because we have so many metrics following us, and metrics like just are like, for lack of a better phrase, a boner killer.
Yeah,
Like they really are. So I try to go back into child state. Like I have to trick myself into like not looking at those things, and I have to do this dance where I'll be like, okay, there's gonna be a phase where I'm gonna look at my analytics, and then there's gonna be a phase where I don't, because I have to just be in creation mode.
All right, I gotta ask you, homie, how the hell do you have a name like Milck when you're lactose intolerant?
It's so funny. I didn't even realize the irony of that. My given name is Connie Kimberly Lim. So my first 2 initials are CK.
Right.
Lim, Lim. So I took my name that my family gave me and I flipped it all inside out. So Lim, Lim spelled backwards is MIL. And then my first 2 initials is CK. I wanted to take what my parents gave me, but make it my own. And also I loved that it also symbolizes what parents give to their children to nourish them. So nourishing the next generation. I've always wanted my music to feel nourishing. And so I really like that it's also sounds like the drink milk, and it's also what my family gave me. And in the Chinese language, when we say our names, we say our last names first and then our first names. So that's how integral family is in our culture. It's like family first, then you. So if I were to introduce myself, it'd be I'm Lim Connie.
Milck, where can people find you and all the amazing music and the documentary you're putting out?
Yeah, so we're screening the documentary. We're actually doing some giveaways for tickets like here and there. So if people follow me on socials, Milck Music, MILCK Music. And then we just launched ican'tkeepquiet.org, which will be where the documentary lives. And then also we'll continue to like build different things that we can't keep quiet about into the website, just to like continue the dance between art and activism.
Don't waste another year of your life, so keep watching to learn actually how to get unstuck.
Our minds weave so many stories and loop them, and you talk about this in your book, where it's these narratives that just keep playing for us. And it's really interesting because I think we're at a very fascinating time, and I can't wait to hear your take on this, where women are really seeking out like, what is my identity? But a lot of times when we ask that question, we're looking externally of like, who do people say I am? Or how do people describe me? Or what are the titles people use for me? And we're looking at like identity from a lens of like, well, what would I tell someone if I change?
It's so powerful, and actually it's a perfect place to talk about your book, How Are You Doing Really? Because you say in the book, so many of us say, I'm fine. Oh no, I'm great. But how are you doing really? Do you think, to your point about identity, that so many of us, let's say you have the identity of being the person that can carry the load, being the person that holds the family together, do you think that that's why we give such candid responses without actually being honest with ourselves?
I think we're afraid to be honest with ourselves. So in the book and in my life, I've shared very openly about our struggles to start a family. And when I was pregnant with Coco, it was actually my third pregnancy. And I remember one day being in the grocery store, really pregnant. It was super hot outside, having small talk with the cashier. And she goes, "Is this your first?" And my heart was split in two in that very moment, because part of me wanted to say, yes, this is my first. But the other part of me was like, the reality is this is my third. And I paused long enough to ask myself, do I really want to get into this with the cashier? Do I really want her to know my story? Probably not. But I recognize that a lot of times when we answer that question, how am I really, with good, busy, I'm great, I'm blessed, all these things, it's because we're asking ourselves, do I really want to get into it? Like, am I really willing to go there? And will this person or will myself be willing to go there with me?
I got a great quote from yours, girl, about this. It's about asking that hard, actually asking yourselves that hard question and then answering it. We're scared of what we'd hear if we got quiet enough to ask ourselves the questions that matter. Is there more out there? Is this it? Am I actually happy? What's now? What next? What's wrong?
Doesn't that give you goosebumps?
It does. Because it seems so simple. And yet, not being able to answer this question is what holds us stuck, unhappy in lives that we didn't realize, maybe that we're even living. Maybe we didn't even realize we can ask more. So how do we even start to begin to be okay with asking ourselves the question? Like, we'll get to how do you answer it.
Yeah.
But how on earth right now can people start to even just recognize, I need to actually ask this question for myself?
Well, I think we all know we do. And I also think that we've been ignoring our inner knowing for way too long. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, when you know you gotta like go to the DMV, or like, I need to go to the dentist. And it's nagging on you, right? Like, it's this one thing that will probably take an hour of your life, and you're gonna feel so much better when it's freaking done. Like, why am I putting this off forever?
You spend 3 hours just worrying about the hour you're spending there.
And I feel like that's how this question is. Because it's like, we all know we need to answer it, and yet we've been putting it off. And the actual art of it is not as bad and scary as it is. It might be hard, it might be uncomfortable. But when you get it over with, when you get through it, when you get past it, you're going to feel so much better. Have you ever, like, sometimes my Apple Watch will go off and be like reminding me to breathe. And I think about it, and it's actually quite profound, because it's like, I have been breathing unknowingly, unconsciously my entire life. But when it reminds me to breathe, and I actually take that deep belly breath, I'm like reminded of like, oh, I really wasn't like breathing deeply. Or when somebody tells you like, unclench your jaw, or like drop your shoulders, and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize like how stressed or rigid or tense I was. And so I would say the easiest way and the easiest place to start is like, do a body scan. Like, close your eyes, pay attention, like, where am I feeling tension? Where am I not breathing deeply? Like, where is my body like telling me something or asking me something? And like, that could be like a 60-second thing. Like, anyone can do something for 60 seconds. It's like those workouts when they're yelling at you and they're like, 60 more seconds. And you're like, I can do anything for 60 seconds. So that's where I would start.
Oh, it's so true. And that's why I actually love the title of your book as well, because it's like, how are you really? And I have another quote of yours. The book is so damn good, girl. The things that we try to ignore, the unsent messages, the times we did apologize, but for something we didn't at all need to do. The times we trivialized our accomplishments. The times we said no worries when we felt betrayed. The times we said to our doctor, it's probably nothing but. Woo! How many people listening right now have said this a million times over? So tell us about what it's doing to our bodies, why the unsent messages are actually very dangerous, and how we can now start to pivot and start to deliberately send those messages to ourselves.
So when I wrote that part, I was thinking about the frustration. Have you ever tried to text and like the little arrow shows up that it's like not sending, like it's not going through? It's like, and you're like, keep pushing the button, like send, send, send. And it's like, where's the Wi-Fi? And it's like, you're freaking out and you're like turning the internet on and off. And like, I did that yesterday when I like landed on the plane and I was like, turn the Wi-Fi on, cellular internet. Why is this not sending? And our bodies are sending us messages all of the time. I mean, you've experienced it on your own health journey where it like your body took you to a screeching halt where it was like, no more. We've got to figure this out multiple times. And I think about like these unsent messages where it's like the universe, our intuition, maybe a friend, our bodies are all trying to get through to us. But we just keep on. We keep on being a good girl. We keep on saying yes. We keep on following the American dream. We keep on doing all these things and we ignore all of those messages. And I mean, you've had this as well. I mean, your book talks about this where you look back and you're like, oh, that's what that meant. Or I went through this because hindsight is always 20/20, but what if we could have foresight? Right? Like, what if we could be paying attention to what's coming at us these days? And so the line in the book is like talking about all the unsent messages that a 5G network couldn't even handle, that we are just like walking through life, like ignoring. And the whole premise of that is like, if we wake up and like start paying attention, we are being guided, whether spiritually, through mentors, through our intuition, through our gut. And a lot of times we are so head down, like in the work, in the busyness, in just being good, that we miss like what could be better.
Oh my God, that's so powerful. And it becomes like these little decisions, one by one, micro, that don't seem like a big deal at first. And that's what I love about your book. Like you really go into all the things that we kind of dismiss.
Yes.
I'm fine. I'm okay. Like you said, it's like, you know, oh yeah, sure, this is my fault. And it wasn't really. You're apologizing over here when you didn't really need to. And you kind of think in the moment, it's not a big deal. But the fact how you put it in your book, like your body stores it and your body starts to really remember those. And so do you think that's what really leads us into never asking ourselves this question in the first place? Like, how are you actually doing?
I think that we are afraid to do it because if the answer is that I'm not okay, then I've got to face that. And I think we're afraid to face it. And it's almost like we're tricking ourselves that like, if we don't acknowledge it, then we don't have to do anything about it. And that's scary.
All right, so there's so freaking true, but there's a massive gap, right? There's the starting, it's like, I don't even want to address it because it's really freaking scary. And then what you said slightly earlier was like, when you come out of it, it's the best thing. So knowing these two bookends, there's this whole freaking mess in the middle. So what is this first step? So asking ourselves, how are we doing? Is there actually a way to do that? Like, do you suggest, for instance, like a safe place? Or like, because even just saying that to someone right now, when they are feeling so overwhelmed, when they are worried that by asking themselves this question, they're going to break. How do you take that first step?
It's going to look different for everyone. And one of the things that I was so conscious of in writing the book was that there's a line in it where it's like someone else's directions might not take you to your destination. And the reason why I said that, and I say that with so much love, because I am someone that loves to like walk people through and here are the steps and the strategies and the tricks. I also want people to like have the self-awareness and the self-belief to come home and to figure out what's going to work for them. So I say that with like, I'm not going to tell you to lay on the floor. I'm not going to tell you to sit in a chair and close your eyes. Like those things don't work for me. What works for me might not work for you, but how can we figure out, honestly, how you could start with a minute to yourself, how you could face the answer if it is, I'm not okay, or I'm not happy, or I'm faking that I'm enjoying my life. How can you start to lean into the question, whether you do it with someone or yourself? And so the subtitle of my book is Finding Your Truth One Answer at a Time. And it's not about my truth, it's about your truth.
1,000%. I'd love for you to share a story though of how you started to notice when this was actually becoming a point in your life where you started to realize, okay, by not asking myself this question is going to be extremely detrimental to my happiness, my career, my relationship.
Yeah. So there's a story in the book where I'm sitting in my office, and I worked in corporate America, a windowless office, and I can picture my boss's corner office. It was a female boss, and she was wonderful. I loved her. And she called me into her office, and I sat down, and I noticed this picture of these two little blonde kids. And I had heard about her children, but she very much kept like her personal life and her work life very separate. And I just said, tell me about your kids. And she goes, you know, if I'm lucky, I get home and I get to see them for like a half hour before bedtime. I wake up, I drop them off at daycare, and then the nanny picks them. And I could just tell it was like something really sensitive to her, where she shouldered a lot of guilt. And we moved the conversation along, and she goes, here, I want to outline like our 5-year plan for you. And I was like, and it was all typed up and written up. And I was like, never once did anyone ask me, like, what do you want? Where do you want to go? What's next? And so I'm staring at this document where it is like, here is the next 5 years of your life planned out for you. And I had this like sinking feeling, like this realization of like, this is not for me. They were talking about like more money, more responsibility, more things. And I was like, nobody even asked if I was content where I'm at. And it was like this gut feeling of like, I've got to get out of here. Like, how am I really? I got to get out of here. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out. And I remember I went back to my office, and there's this picture of Drew and I on my desk. And I was like, I never want to look at that and be reminded of what I'm missing, just like she is. I never want that. And I didn't even want kids at the time, but I like envisioned this life, and I'm like, do I want to spend my life sitting at a desk looking at the person I love in a picture, or do I want to spend my life looking at the person I love in their eyes? And that was like, okay, we're going to have to figure this out. So what are we going to do? And so I feel like my how are you really moments happen with these like little pings of like, sometimes I learn better through what's not for me than understanding what is for me. Like, I can tell things I never want to do again. And sometimes that can guide me even more than things that I'm curious about trying. And I think a lot of women get stuck because they're like, I know I want to do something, but I don't even know what it is. Maybe start with what you don't want to do. Maybe that can be your guide.
I love that. And something you said then, so someone giving you your 5-year plan actually was the best gift you could have gotten. And as you're talking, I was like, oh, that's actually really genius. Like, what if everyone right now paused and wrote down not what they want to be doing, but right now where they are. If they kept doing it, where would they be in 5 years? And then ask themselves if they love that.
Yes.
Because they almost served you up like a fortune teller, like, hey, this is going to be your future. Do you want it? And it's that visceral gut reaction that almost probably then propelled you into going, this isn't for me.
Yes, 100%. And that's what I think is fascinating is a lot of times when we try to have visions for ourselves, or when we visualize ourselves, it's like we're waiting for the like when I lose the 10 pounds, when I have the baby, when I have the relationship, when I have the money, when I have the house, when. And it's like, if we look at our days or our weeks, or if you pull out your calendar and do an audit, do the things that you're seeing, do they align with the when? Because a lot of times we spend these waiting seasons and we waste them, right? Like, we're just like, I'm just waiting for the thing to be the thing that's the when. Well, what if we actually worked in the waiting season? And I'm not saying hustle, I'm saying work towards that vision. Like, is what you do after you watch this show or listen to this show, is that aligned with the vision that you're holding? Is there a tiny micro step you can take to get one bit closer? And I feel like we get so overwhelmed by these big visions that we let like our procrastination turn into like paralyzation. You know, I mean, I feel like we both experienced that.
Oh God, that was so strong, girl. One of my favorite quotes in your book is something like, "Someday is where cool ideas go to die."
Always. It's like every time we're like, someday I'll do that. And you know what I think is fascinating about like the world that we live in right now is that a lot of us, our character was tested during the pandemic because we have said for years, when life slows down, I will pick up a new hobby. I will learn how to play the piano. I will eat healthier. I will cook dinner. I will, go on bike rides, whatever. Well, for many of us, if we were fortunate enough, life did kind of offer us a slowdown. Suddenly our travels were cleared, work obligations were different, whatever that looks like. And we almost had to look ourselves in the mirror and be like, am I who I said I was going to be with a slowdown? And do I like who I am in this slowdown? And I think why the book is the perfect book for this time is because as we are navigating out of it, it's like, what do we want to go back to? And how do we want to craft a new normal? And what does that look like? And if we didn't get honest with ourselves over the last 2 years, or we didn't have an awakening, or we didn't have that nudge or that feeling, how can we invite that right now so that we don't look back to today, 2 years from now, and be like, nothing changed? Because nothing changed.
And so what would you say? Like, let's say now people are listening, they're like, okay, I really want to invite this in. What is that first step on inviting it in?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you've just been so many years ignoring it and pushing it out. And so sometimes you actually don't realize the door's still locked.
Yeah.
So how do you start to unlock that?
Yeah. So I always think about like when you feel safe to answer that question, really, because there is a difference. It's like if you're talking to the barista at Starbucks and they ask you how you are, I think good and busy are appropriate responses. When
Not give them your life story.
Yes. When you are with your friend, like we were just having lunch, when you're with your friend and they kind of, you get past the good and busy and then you kind of lean in a little bit and you feel safe. So I would first say, like, how can you create a safe space, whether it is with someone else or yourself, to have the bandwidth to process? And there's a chapter in the book called like feel your feelings, like feelings are meant to be felt. And it was a massive lesson that I learned in working with a toddler, my toddler, who is a deep feeler. Like she is just, she'll literally sit down and be like, let's talk about my feelings. And we talk about feelings a lot. And I recognized that a lot of times in life, we've believed the lie that like good is the destination. Like we should always just be trying to get to good and happy, right? Like happiness is the goal. Even in children's books, I'll like see when it talks about things, it's like the goal is to be happy. Well, a lot of us are unhappy and that unhappiness results in us feeling broken. Surely something is wrong with me because, and you talk about this, where your gratitude turned into like the prison, like the handcuffs of like, gratitude is wonderful. Gratitude is a great practice, but it can also make us belittle the hard or the pain or the like uncomfort of life. And so if somebody is sitting there and they don't even know where to start, like first, how can you create a safe space? Does that look like blocking off an hour of your time and sitting in your car where you don't have distractions? Does it look like standing in the shower where you don't have your phone to numb yourself out? Does it look like taking a weekend trip or a staycation or booking a hotel room? Does it look like sitting in your closet floor while your kids don't know where you are? Like, what does that look like? And it's fascinating to me because if I look back on my decade of entrepreneurship, the biggest times that I had like the greatest evolutions or breakthroughs were the times where I gave myself margin and space, like time to think. When I cut back on work and I said, okay, now I'm going to paint or I'm going to do different things. And so when we don't create margin and space, we don't have room for creativity. We don't have room for questioning. We don't have room for exploration. We don't have room for curiosity. And I think all of those things are required to actually change.
Oh, that's so hard though when you've been spending so much time blocking out the feelings, right? So you even said in the book, like we talk ourselves out of our own feelings.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we have numbed out our feelings. And here's kind of an example of a way that we've done this. So even with our best friends, so I have some friends I've been friends with college. We went to college together. And we'll like voice text and we talk about everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. But I've noticed that whenever we have something hard in our life, where I was like, but it's not that bad because you're doing so much more. Or it's not that bad because I know of a single parent. Or it's not that bad because I know someone has it worse. And our culture has this beautiful awareness, right? We are so aware of how fortunate we are, of privilege, of, you know, situations where like other people do have it massively worse. There's no denying it. But when we lean on that, or when we compare our hard to someone else's hard, we belittle what's actually happening in our life. I do it all the time. I had a really hard parenting week, and I was just like, I feel like a terrible mom. I just don't know how to mother right now. And then I was sending it to my friend, and I was just like, tell me it gets easier. Like, tell me. And then I was like, but I'm so lucky, and I'm so, you know, and we do that. And it's like, when did we enter into a space where we can't say, this is hard right now, or I need help right now? And so when it comes to emotions, I feel like we do a lot of the same thing, where it's like, I'm sad, but I should be happy because of this. And so I've had to teach my daughter, like, if you're sad, it's okay to be sad and like to feel it, because when you allow yourself to feel it, then you can start to move forward. If we're just trying to bury it, we all know it erupts at some point, whether it's with our spouse or children or a team or whatever that looks like. And so I've tried to help her, give her tools to feel her feelings and then move through them. So even before I left for this trip, I left a note for her, and it said, remember, and I drew pictures because she can't read the words. It said, smell the flowers and blow out the candles to take deep breaths. Because she'll say, Mommy, show me how to do it. And so I'm like, sometimes we need to remember how to smell the flowers and blow out the candles so that we can just sit in our feelings without trying to push them or get past them or move through them too quickly.
God, that's so powerful. Because we really, you think you say default, right?
Yeah.
Like we all think of happiness as being our default.
Yep.
And so if we're not there, then something is wrong. But yet so much of my own life the beauty has come through the struggle. Now look, it is all in hindsight, because when you're struggling, it doesn't feel right.
Yes.
So what do you tell yourselves in those moments where you're feeling down?
Yeah.
And you know, right? Like, because there's a big gap between intellectually knowing and then feeling it.
Yes.
So when you're feeling sad and you may be saying, well, I should be happy, you know that well, hang on a minute, happiness isn't the default, but it still doesn't feel real. Is it the deep breaths that then soothes you in those moments so that you're not being overwhelmed by the fact that you think you should, quote unquote, be happy?
Yeah. Well, even when I was in my tough motherhood week, for me, I have to turn and like serve others. Like, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to 3 other moms just to say, I'm thinking of you. Hope you're doing okay. Is there something with the moon cycle going on? Because our kids are crazy, but like we're in this together. Because a lot of times I think what I've found with emotions is we feel lonely in them. Right? And with the world we live in, everyone's showing up with their happy faces online. And so when we're feeling sad or frustrated or anxious or overwhelmed, it feels isolating. And when I feel isolated, I then go into that narrative of like, something's wrong with me. I'm broken. It's me. It's nothing else. It's just me. Something is wrong. And so I found that like when I invite people in or share, or even just reach out to other people and I hear like, oh, you're not alone, or this resonates, or like, I'm in the thick of it too. I'm like, oh, nothing's broken. This is just a part of the process. I posted these Instagram stories because I had like a marathon work day, and Coco woke up at like 3 a.m. and was literally asking me what the Northern Hemisphere was.
At 3 a.m,
yep,
as you do.
And for 2.5 hours, why do people sleep on their backs? Where do dogs sleep? Do cows stand up? The questions coming out of this 3-year-old were insane. And I posted this Instagram story the next day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to delete this, but like, I am just exhausted, and I love being a mom, and I love my work so much. And it just feels like so much love to carry sometimes that it's so hard. Because it's like, I feel stretched thin because of the fullness of life. So nothing is bad and nothing is broken and nothing is wrong, but like life is full, and I don't know if I can always carry that. And I was like, I think I'm going to delete these, but I just wanted to share where I'm at. Well, my DMs just flooded with people like, oh my gosh, I'm in it. I'm in the thick of it. And I was like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, this is normal. I think sometimes we just want to feel a little less alone and like a little more enough. And so when it comes to feelings, it's like if we know that we are not the only ones, it kind of gives us permission to like sit with it a little bit longer, to like not waste the waiting of like trying to get back to whatever default we're trying to get back to.
And do you think that was so powerful, but do you think that we keep trying to go back to the default because it's a comfort zone? Like, what is that?
I think it's just because it's our programming. We've been taught to be happy, healthy, smile, show up, you know, all those things. And of course, happiness would be a great destination to land on. But if we don't release the pressure that it has to be our go-to state at all times, I think our lives would actually be fuller. Because, I mean, they always say like the dichotomy, like you don't know how rich happiness can be if you haven't experienced the depth of sadness. And when we're like just kind of trying to maintain a status quo, our lives are like bland, right? I mean, I feel like there are times where you can look at your calendar and be like, who booked this? Or like, I don't want to do this thing. Or like, why did I say yes to this thing? And it's like we go through these days just to get through them. Like we're not actually in them. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, God, that's so powerful. And so you shared a bit of your story where you lost 2 children.
Yeah.
And so to this point of happiness,
Yeah.
it's going to be a hard question for me to ask, but I hope you're okay to go there.
I'll go there.
When you have tried to have a child and you've already lost 2 and now you're on your 3rd one and it's like you feel the blessing. And in moments that you just said where you're exhausted and this blessing is now a strain and this blessing is now tiring you, stressing you out, definitely maybe not getting in your way, but definitely in competition with where your hours are going to be spent on your business and stuff like that. How do you own those moments without feeling guilty about them?
I would love to know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I feel like it's interesting because motherhood is like the greatest gift in my life. And I have always, like, when I decided I wanted to be a mom, I wanted to be a really good mom. And it's wild because I have so much confidence in saying I'm a really good mom. Like I am a great
freaking amazing
mother. And I'm there and I love my kids. But it's interesting because even lately, I can find myself questioning like, is it the right time? Should I be working? Should I, like, even last night, I'm in LA to be here with you. And I went to sleep and didn't turn on Coco's baby monitor. And she woke up yelling for me. And like that freaking like breaks your heart. Because you're like, I should be there. I should be here. I should be there. I need sleep, but I should, and it's like, I should. And it's like, what is balance? And I've found in my journey that like balance doesn't work for me. Like I have to blend things because I can't be one person in one moment and another person in the next. And for me, I tried to do that. Like I wanted to be like Mom Jenna and CEO Jenna. And I am just Jenna. I am a whole human being. I mean, we were like eating lunch and I'm pumping, but we're talking about business and like, this is just the dichotomy of what it means. And it's fascinating because women with children who work feel guilty because they're not with their kids. And women who stay home with their children feel guilty because they're not contributing or working. Mm-hmm. And it's wild because I've even had to get so careful in my language around using the words like working mom because every mom is working. Mm-hmm. But like a mother with a career or like how I even phrase it because it is such a sensitive thing. And so it's interesting, like on those challenging days, because I love entrepreneurship. I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur through and through. Like I love the lifestyle that entrepreneurship has afforded me. And I'm so content with not growing every year, with not, one-upping myself. I'm like, if I can maintain my lifestyle and maintain living my life, I am living the dream. And so most of the time I have so much flexibility. Like I put kids down for naps all day. I feed Quinn. I'm like, have fun. I'm like typing with one hand. Like that's the life that I've chosen. But it doesn't mean it's easy. And so it is wild. And it's also really hard because it's like, I prayed so hard for these kids. And so I see them as just like the best miracles in the world. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard still. Like joy and gratitude can exist with challenge. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do you find the space to live in that? And it's uncomfortable.
It's so true, and it's really uncomfortable. And the reason why I asked that question is because I really think it's relevant on every aspect of someone's life. It doesn't matter if it's
100%.
kids.
Yep.
If you're trying to go for something,
Yep.
a sports career, or starting a business, a family, and you try and you fail, and you try and you fail, and you try, and then you succeed. But there are moments of exhaustion.
Yeah.
There are moments of tears and unhappiness and sadness and what the hell am I doing? Like in every aspect. But
Everything.
when we fight hard for something and we tell everybody this is what we're gonna do, and then in those moments where we've got it and we're shattered, we feel guilty about saying how tired we are, because most people actually will respond, well, that's what you wanted.
Yes.
Right? And so now
Yes.
you're like, I have no space to have an exhale, to do the, what was it, the blow out the candle,
Yes.
the smell the
Yes.
roses, blow out the
Yes.
candle. I've got no space to do that because now I feel guilty about saying when something's tough.
Yep.
And I think that's doing such a disservice. And going to like the parenting thing, I can only imagine what that feels like when it's a human being.
I know.
Right? Where it's like, I've been wanting this child, and yet it's freaking difficult. And there are
Yes.
times where I need help. I'm struggling. And we feel like we are, and I think going back to the very first question of how do we get stuck? It's these little things, those little moments where we don't feel like we can exhale. We don't feel like we can talk to people
Yep.
because there's no one there to greet us.
Yep. Oh gosh. You know, one thing that I started doing, actually I did it to you last week, but in reaching out to people who have big things going on, whether you just had a baby, you're launching a book, you're starting a business, is not projecting what I think they should be feeling. And so one of my friends had a baby recently, and I messaged her and I said, on a scale of 1 to 5, where are you at today? Are you needing encouragement, or are you feeling on top of the world? Because I remember when I first had Coco, I was just so grateful. Like, she's safe, she's healthy. Like, I mean, it was better than $1 million. But people would be like, oh, you must be so exhausted. You must, and they were projecting that. And I was like, oh, I actually, like, I'm doing really good. And then there would be times where people would be like, isn't this the best age? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, this age is so challenging. And so I've tried to start approaching conversations and being like, tell me where you're at and what you need before I project how you should be feeling or how I think you are feeling. Because when we do that, it doesn't give space. Imagine telling a new mom, like, you must be overjoyed, but really they're overwhelmed. They would feel crazy to say, actually, I'm like in a really dark place, or, you know, and so I've been trying to like start conversations of like, tell me where you're at, so I can converse accordingly, so I can support you accordingly. And I think that's really changed a lot. And I think if we did that for ourselves too, of like, instead of thinking how I should feel, like, where am I at? On a scale of 1 being miserable and 5 being on top of the world and vibrant, where am I at?
And when you answer the question honestly and you realize you're at like a 0 or a 1, how do you then start to change that? Because when you asked me, actually, it's interesting. I think it was like a 1 to 10 you asked me. And I went to put 1, and then part of me felt guilty about putting a 1 because I was like, well, I don't want her to think I'm really that bad. So let me just put a 3. I can't remember what I ended up answering you. But it was interesting how I processed my answer to you in order to, in fact, in real time, I'm actually processing this now. What was interesting is it allowed me to process, am I actually feeling that bad? Or am I just tired? In fact,
It was your check-in.
in fact, oh my God, I have to talk to you about this.
the line.
Girl, it is the best line in your book.
Yeah.
Do you need to change careers or just take a nap?
Yes.
I actually laughed out loud because it's so true.
Yes.
When you get to burnout, you're like, I need to move places. I need to move countries. What the hell am I doing with my career? And then you take a nap. And you eat well. And you sit in the sun. And all of a sudden you're like, I love my career.
Isn't that funny? There's a story in my book when I hit burnout, and I literally like wanted to take my laptop and like Control-Alt-Delete the whole thing and like chuck it out the window. And thank God I took like some melatonin and like took a little snooze and like woke up the next day and was like, oh, I'm okay. And I always come back to this idea of like what we need is rest. And it's like that rest, don't quit idea of like, we quit and give up so easily because it's hard, or we're tired, or we're lacking resources, or whatever it is, when really we just need to slow our pace down, or we need to remember that like we've already come so far, or we just need to take a break or take a step away. And so many people, I think, are walking around with this guilt of not having achieved what they thought they would, or not following through on their commitments, or not achieving the goal, when really all they needed was a break. They just needed to rest. And I sometimes recognize that in myself, where if I have a idea I'm so excited about, but then I find myself in it and I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? This is crazy. I'm like, I don't need to quit it. First, I just need to rest. I interviewed Nastia Liukin, who's an Olympic gymnast, and I remember, I will never forget part of her interview where I asked her, were there days that you ever wanted to quit? And she goes, oh, there are so many days, but my parents, her dad was her coach, said you can only quit on a good day. And I think about that a lot, because if you asked anyone on a good day, would you quit? They wouldn't, right? I mean, 99% of the people would be like, hell no, this is amazing. And so I've always thought about that when I'm having a bad day, because I'm like, would I quit if this was a really good day? No. Okay, then I just need to rest.
That's a true test right there.
Yes. And I feel like it's such a powerful thing, because when we think about the story in my book where I'm talking about like you don't have to move zip codes and all these things, it's like so many of us, and I feel like even culturally right now, we've experienced burnout, like as a culture, through what we've all been through all the uncertainty. It's like we're just burnt out on uncertainty, right? And so it's like, where is the breakthrough? And I hope that for some people, the breakthrough is in them understanding what they are willing to do and what they won't do, and like what they want to do and what they will refuse to do, and what boundaries will look like and how they want to move forward. And I feel like we have this beautiful invitation right now to craft a new life. Like we kind of get this fresh start. It's like why we love Mondays and January 1st and the start of months is like we all are craving a new start, like a fresh beginning. And it's like any day can be your fresh beginning. But like, what would it look like if you were well rested and like awake to your life and like awake to the vision and like willing to progress? And we always use this line in my book. It's like where the woo meets the work, because so many of us are believing that we have to be in one camp or the other. And I really, truly believe that there are two camps, especially for women right now. It's the manifestation side, dream it and it'll come. Just say what you want into the universe. I'll bring it to you. And the hustle side, the wake up at 5 a.m., grind a little harder, don't give up, be relentless in your pursuit. And these camps have become polarizing, like everything else on planet Earth, of like it's one or the other, it's this or that. And I want more room for the and. And so one of the words and lines that we use in my book often is it's where the woo meets the work, where we can have these manifestations and these visions, but we also are willing to do the work to make them happen. I mean, it's like actual proven science that manifestation. I had Dr. Tara Swart on the podcast, and her interview was fascinating. And I was like, tell me about manifestation. Does it really work? She said, the reason why it works is if you keep the vision close enough to you, you will keep moving towards it. And it's kind of like when you are on the market to buy something new, like you're going to buy like new shoes or a new purse or whatever it is that you like to buy, you all of a sudden start noticing them, right? Yeah. And so if you have that vision close enough, you start to notice that things can work and things are happening and things can unfold or invitations are coming your way. And so I want to invite people to recognize that like it's not one or the other, it can be an and. And when we hold visions and when we come out of this, I hope we have a vision, we can start to put the work behind it.
Whew, okay, there's so much that you just said there. First of all, I love the line you even say, because your podcast goal diggers, you're like, but look, be a goal digger, but also be a goal getter.
Yes.
And that's the second part that a lot of people miss.
Yes.
And so I love that you said that. It's like, look, you need the vision in order to know how to act, but you also have to act.
Yes.
And then leaning on what you just said about boundaries, I really want to go down in here, because I really want people to know everything you say, you are the epitome of practicing what you preach. So sometimes I'll text you, or you'll text me like, sorry, I just woke up from a nap. Yeah. And I'm like, I love your life.
I know.
Like, But here's the thing, it wasn't accidental.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. Like when we talk a lot and, I just had a nap or I had a massage.
Yeah.
You work hard at your work.
Yeah.
But you also give yourself utter grace and beauty to take the nap, to do the rest.
Yep.
And you are such the epitome of that. And to do that, you said your hero is boundaries.
Yes. Let's talk about it. Boundaries are fascinating to me because I feel like there was this line back in the day in Sex and the City, and when I was emo and had AOL Instant Messenger, I remember I used that line in my AIM profile at one point. But it's something about like how boundaries keep things out. Like we believe that boundaries are like these fences that like keep things or people or opportunities out. But I have learned the exact opposite, that boundaries keep me in my life. They keep me in the moment. They keep me in alignment. They keep me living in integrity. And I really learned this so much when I became a new mom and I realized that like I was lacking boundaries. Like in 1 minute, I could be like typing an email for work and then I'd be feeding a baby. And I recognized that like if I want to truly blend these things, I have to have boundaries. Because I don't want to get a text message when I'm with my family out at the zoo and all of a sudden I'm thinking about work and it pulls me out of my life. Like I want to be in the moments that I'm in. And so when I create boundaries, whether it's with my team or relationships or what I will say yes and no to, it really keeps me living in integrity with what I say are my values. Because we all say that certain things are our values, but our actions do not line up, right? And that's just the human nature. I'm not perfect at that, but I try really freaking hard. And it's funny because, I'll hear people talk about their values or like family first or all these things. Well, like you look at their life and it's like, when do they even have time for their family? Or like, I enter entrepreneurship to have freedom, but I'm like tied to my work. Like, how does this happen? And so I love boundaries. I exercise them, but I do it with grace and I do it with conviction. And here's a good example. When Coco was born, I literally blacked out my entire calendar and said, I'm going to say no to everything for an entire year because I didn't know what motherhood would feel like. I didn't know how I would feel. I said no to everything. I told my team, don't even let me see emails. I don't even want to see opportunities because they're going to feel sparkly and shiny, and nothing is shinier than being home with my kid. And it was a beautiful thing because I wrote a template and it basically said, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm so flattered or honored that you reached out to me. And I just want you to know that I'm going to politely decline, but it is not in any way a reflection of you, your idea, your invitation. It is only a reflection of me living out my values. If I say yes to you, I'm saying no to what matters the most to me or what I say matters the most to me. And I just want you to know that I am cheering you on. I wish you the best. And I hope that in doing this and doing it in this way, it invites you to live out your values in a stronger way. And never once did anyone get angry with me. We're always so worried about disappointing people. In fact, I think that response inspired more people than disappointed them.
So what are the steps to get there? A, acknowledging that you absolutely need the boundary in the first place of where things aren't serving you.
Yep.
And then how do you start to implement it? Because everything you said is so beautiful, right? Showing someone grace. Girl, I'm so freaking with you there.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it from the flip, when someone's putting a boundary on you, how would you want them to say, hey, you're crossing a boundary, stop doing that? Or would you want them to go, I'm really doing this because it's for me. I'm so happy. Hopefully this helps you. It's like, wow, shit, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So it gives a great perspective. But some people are too petrified to even say to themselves, you deserve to set a boundary.
Yes.
So how on earth did you even realize that you were worth it?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that I feel like we are so afraid of saying no because we are afraid of losing momentum. Whether that's momentum in motherhood, career, relationship, we worry that setting a boundary is going to pause or slow down our success and that we'll never be able to catch back up. It is like this fear of God in us that if we pump the brake, we won't know where the gas pedal is. And I think that the reason that is because so many of us feel like our success had to have been a fluke, or that we were lucky, or that someone gave us our big break, or that we're never going to get this opportunity again. We got to strike while the iron's hot. Well, the iron is hot when you turn the iron on, friend. Like don't, like, I have seen so many women who are like just running and they're like, I'll slow down when things slow down. Nothing's going to slow down. Has life slow down, you know? And so it's like, when did we stop trusting ourselves to know how to turn the iron on?
I'm going to steal that, by the way. That is
do.
so amazing.
Please do, because it's like, it's so wild. So when it comes to boundaries, we refuse to set them because we are just waiting for our next big break. We are just waiting for invites to keep the momentum when we don't realize like we were the source in the beginning. Like other people's things aren't working for you because they're not from you. Like they didn't come from you. And so with boundaries, I mean, first things first is like, pull out your calendar and do an audit. What do you never want to do again? What are you mad that you agreed to? What do you see on your calendar and you're like, I never want to see that again? Now, I mean, some things you've got to keep, whether it's like taking your kid to soccer practice or like doing the laundry or whatever, but there
I'm
are
going to challenge you on doing the laundry.
Preach, you're right. But there are so many opportunities for us to create like a not to-do list.
Yeah.
It's like our lives are like constant to-do lists. And there are things, so like for me, being in alignment was like, the first step was when I was a wedding photographer, it was like, I'm going to take 1 weekend off each month, which in the Midwest, the wedding season is 6 months long. That's like literally cutting out a chunk of your income. But I was like, I don't even enjoy summer anymore. I don't even enjoy it because I don't have time for it. I missed friends' weddings. I missed family cabin weekends. When I was with my family, I brought my computer with. I was constantly tethered. I was never off. And so what is one small way that you can do that? And usually a calendar audit will show you like, here's what your life is saying about your values, your priorities, and your goals, because this is what you're doing. And how we spend our days is how we spend our life. And so I would start with that and do a not to do list. And the second piece of that, and there's a chapter in the book about this where it's like, what is your enough point? And a lot of us are overworking ourselves because we're so afraid of like scarcity, but we don't recognize that there is an enough point where what we have is enough, what we've earned is enough, that our work is enough. And I have pivoted so many times in my career. And the only way I've ever been able to pivot and try something new was saying, I am only going to book the bare minimum to pay the mortgage or to buy the groceries or whatever it is. And I'm going to just free up my time. My time is more valuable than my money right now. And when we work out of our place of like our enoughness, we feel the safety and security necessary to then be able to have the freedom for creativity and margin and rest. But so many of us don't even know what an enough point is. We don't know like, what is the bare minimum that I need to do? And we also don't know how to cut it off when we hit that point, right?
Right.
So it's like more is more. More is not always more. More is not always better. And so I love, and you guys talk about this all the time too, is it's like money will only buy you happiness to a certain extent. And I remember the day that I hit 6 figures and I was like, I thought this would feel different. I am so burnt out. I'm exhausted. I would way rather make $50,000 and have weekends free, time with my husband. Like this, I have money in my bank account and I can't even enjoy it. And so I had to establish an enough point. And I told you, I remember, I literally made this like color-coded spreadsheet and sat him down and I said, I'm going to tell you something and I just want to know if you agree. And I said, I am willing to cut my work in half and go back to making $50,000 a year because I was happier. Are you with me on that? Are you okay with me? And he looked so relieved. Where he was like, you're right. We don't need more. We've got more than we ever needed. We were happier. You were more available and present. And so it's like every time I've hit those thresholds, I'm like, what is my enough point? What do we need? And how do I just meet my basic needs and then claim back my time?
And that's what you do every time.
Every
It's just
time.
like my enough point.
And now I don't need anything. So now it's like I work out of a place of like, I want to do this, not I have to do this, which is crazy.
How much has that changed how you feel about yourself, how you show up every day, how you think,
I
your
love it because I don't
confidence?
have to do anything.
Right.
Like I know that I could like hang up and like go live in the woods for the rest of my life. And that would be a really good life. But I love what I do so much. And I show up because I love it. But it also gives me that feeling of like, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So anything you see me doing from this point on is because I want to. And that's exciting.
I love that. Girl, you've been through such an evolution of like careers and the way you show up every day. And in that, there are things that you've done that you're like, I said I'd never do this, and now I do.
Yeah.
I said I'd never do this, and now this is the best thing that's happened to me. So many people get stuck in the contradiction.
Yes.
So many people will spend the rest of their lives not addressing what they now want because they fear or the judgment of the fact that they said once upon a time they were going to do this. Go, this freaking haunts me. How on earth do you approach those things and make change, whether it's going against judgment, going against opinion? Because man, if we can figure out this thing where people can go, oh my God, yes, I can give myself the freedom to say, I said I'd never do this, and now here I am, and I'm gonna own it.
Yeah. It's funny, there is this idea of identity foreclosure.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the reason why we hang on to our jeans from high school. It's the reason why we finish degrees when we know they weren't the right choice. It's because we're like, but I already paid for this, or I've already spent 2 years. Why would I waste it? Why are we wasting 2 more years when we know it's not the right thing? And so it is crazy because, and I experienced this in real life when I left my corporate job that had like a 5-word title that sounded really impressive and became a photographer, and people treated me like it was a hobby. I went through this total identity crisis of like, how do I tell people that like my business is important, and how do I make them understand that like I'm really good? And it was wild to me because I was like, man, like we lean on things like as absolutes, right? Like the executive position or the CEO title, or like all these things sound so important. And it's wild because so when Drew and I got married, we were 23, and we were like, we're never having kids. I mean, we were very confident in that. And we were married for 5 years, and we loved our lives. We loved our freedom. We loved sleep. We loved all of these things. And we were just very content, and I loved it. And I loved that time in our life. Both of our parents were married for 5 years before they had kids. And so it was kind of a great thing where neither of our parents were like in a rush, but I think it also devastated them when we were like, nope, we're not having kids, never. You've been through that. And then my heart started to change, and it was weird because I'm like, I have spent a lot of time and energy and money trying not to have this thing. And now I've changed my mind. And I also didn't know what Drew would think, like, because we had had these conversations. So you guys went through the reverse.
Literally, which I'm fascinated to
Literally
talk
the
to you
reverse.
about
You
this.
wanted 4 kids and you were going to be the mama at home. And I was like, never. And now we're like sitting here flipped. And I remember, I think a big thing for us is when our brothers both became dads, and we got to see someone so close to us change and step into that new identity, and also kind of see the reality of like what that meant. And I remember kind of being like, I don't know, I think I might want this, and like really worried about it because I was really at a good place in my career. And, you know, there was just things where I was like, these are the opportunities I've waited for. Am I going to ruin it all by now having changed my mind? And I start off that chapter saying, like, remember when our yearbooks, when you were like, never change, I can't, you know, I love you for who you are, all these things. And I wish that the messaging was like, I can't wait to watch you change. I can't wait to watch who you're going to become. I can't wait to watch you evolve. And I feel like my life has been this conscious meeting of myself often. Like I am like getting to know who I am all the time. It's like every big thing, every milestone, everything that has changed, every new project, it's like, who am I? And like, do I like her? And like, how can I get to know her? There's a quote by Ruby Carr who's like, I will only be this version of myself right now. Like I want to sit and be with her for a while. And I love that because I think we often box ourselves in. We kind of there's a line in the book where it's like we put ourselves into like personality Tupperware where we're like trying to separate, like these are the pieces of me and these are the ways I describe myself, and like this is who I am, where it's like, who can I become? And so when I changed my mind, and when Drew was on board and also had changed his mind, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, well, I'm going to eat my words. And I mean, I had recorded a podcast of like 10 reasons why I won't be a mom.
Oh my God.
Like,
I hadn't heard
there
that.
was I was committed.
Oh my God.
And there have also been podcasts where I'm like, I will never write a book.
Okay, so these are perfect. How on earth do you start to listen to the whisper? Because I think that's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden one day you go, oh my God, I actually wanted kids. Everyone, hey, I know I said I didn't, but now I do. It doesn't happen like that, right?
Yep.
It starts with this little whisper,
Yep.
this little inkling, this little feeling.
Nudge.
And yeah, the nudge. And then that gets a little louder and a
Yep.
little louder. I'm looking for that pivotal moment where
Yeah.
people go, I'm going to shut this, lock it in a box, and throw away the key because I never want anyone to hear the thoughts of how much I want to change, but I'm never going to. So many people do that, and they'll spend the rest of their lives so dedicated to that one commitment they made way back in the day.
Yeah.
But you didn't.
No one remembers those things. We remember those things. Someone the other day, I was on a podcast with her and she was like, I'm so embarrassed because I announced to my audience that I was going to do a podcast with this person and it fell through and I'm just so embarrassed. And I was like, I am a very close follower of you and I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, you know, it's like we all forget, like we have our own microscope up to our own lives, right? Everyone is also head down in their own life. No one is paying that close of attention. There have been times in my life where I've made decisions based around other people or like, I want to move, but like, what if I move and then like everyone moves away? Or like, I want to stay here because of our community. And it's like, no one else is making decisions based on me. So why am I making decisions based on everyone else? And like, for me, I love contradicting myself because I think it shows evolution. Like there are things that I listen to that I said as like absolutes. And there are things even that I wrote in this book where I'm like, 10 years from now, I'm going to look at this and be like, oh, you sweet little Jenna, you had no idea. But I think that's because I have poised myself proudly as a student of life. I am in life school. And life school means that I'm going to be learning. And if I'm learning, I'm growing. And if I'm growing, I'm evolving. And that's the human experience that we're missing. And so if we can like poise ourselves like at the starting line without disqualifying ourselves from the race before it even begins, that's where we actually make progress. So I love contradicting myself because to me, there's no greater compliment than somebody saying you've changed.
I love that so much. And so really I do believe it's a framing, right?
Absolutely.
So in those moments, telling yourself that is so important because, so in fact, telling yourself like, there's so much power. And just right now, I want everyone at home to go, yeah, I'm a walking contradiction.
Yeah.
But like even saying it like that, like,
Yeah.
Because I think it does take that ownership of it.
Absolutely.
And for me, to what you're saying is, because I used to, it used to hold me back. I was like, well, I can't say this out loud. I've just told everyone I want 4 children.
Yeah.
God, I can't tell people I don't want kids now.
Yeah.
I've literally told my husband I want 4 children.
Yeah.
And now I've changed my mind. I realize that what I do now is I express that I recognize I'm changing my mind.
Yeah.
Like there's
yeah.
something, like, but back in the day, I never would. I would have tried to hide. Of like,
Yep.
hopefully people don't remember this part of me. And hopefully, and it's that fear of,
Yeah.
I hope people don't remember this part that brings up so much anxiety that doesn't allow me to own this other part.
Yep.
But in leaning into the admission
Yeah.
of the fact that you're growing and that you pride yourself on change.
Yeah.
Like perspective is everything, girl, and you
Yeah.
just freaking like laid it out so well and beautifully right there. Because I really do think it's those moments, like this whole discussion.
Yeah.
It's about what gets us stuck.
Yes.
What are the things that stop us from progressing, from moving forward, from having the life we really want? And like that last little nugget of gold is so strong.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because like if somebody told me like I'm going to change my mind, I would be like, awesome. But it is wild to me how like hesitant we are.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I always think about this. This is such a dumb example, but I think it's relevant. Where people will like log off of social media and then they'll come back and be like, I'm so sorry I was away. And I was like, nobody knew you were away. And yet we're all walking around with like guilt and shame that like we're not doing what we said we would do when really maybe it was never meant for us. And when we think about our lives, it's like no one is like in your life, like looking at every move you make and like analyzing it except for you. And it's like, you talk about this so much where it's like, we are our own worst critic. Like we are the narrators of our story. But there's this part in my book where it was like, what if you were the director of your own life? Like, you didn't just cast yourself as the extra or the helper, but like you actually imagine like the scenes of your life as the director and the lead. And like, what if you could like help orchestrate what you really want to have happen? And so it is so fascinating to me when people get so wrapped up in other people's opinions, because I absolutely fall into that trap. I don't know if you felt this way, but like when writing the book, it's such an internal process. It's such like a cathartic thing. And then people start reading it. And like, even my mom came over when I was like in the final manuscript days. And like, I was like, you can read this one chapter, but like, that's it. And like, we're writing, but like, it's this experience. And then you're like, I'm releasing it. And now people are reading it. And I was like, am I going to be like so crushed if I get like a negative review? And I was just like freaking out about it. So I asked myself, I said, what are like my favorite books, like the best books? I go up on Amazon, pull it up to read reviews. Oh, they had negative reviews. That's hilarious because I freaking loved that book. And I like reminded myself that like every person who's out there doing something great, even the people that I'm like, oh, they would never get criticism. I'm like, that is just a part of the human process. And so it is so funny to me when people get so wrapped up in like what people would think about a contradiction, or what people would think if you changed, or what people would think if you pursued something new. So much so that it holds you back from doing it. Man, we're like missing out on life.
I agree. And I think that a big part of it, though, is that it's a reflection of us, right?
Yes.
And so it's actually saying to us, well, hang on, what are the contradictions maybe I'm ignoring? Or what are the contradictions that I'm not paying attention to? You know, like all...
Yes, absolutely.
It like shines a light, on our lives. And I think that by saying to someone else, or like, oh, you're not going to do that. Like, why is that a belief system that you have? Or even just to your point about apologizing on social for disappearing.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you feel the need to apologize? Like, what is it? It's like, well, I didn't want to let people down. But like, keep digging,
Yes.
right? Keep peeling
Yes.
back the onion, because I think ultimately it reveals something within inside you. That maybe
Absolutely.
you're feeling like, well, I really struggled here, and so my struggle meant I disappeared, and so maybe I let people down, but I felt like I let people down because maybe I let myself down, right?
Yes.
Like actually freaking unpeeling to see why you feel the need to apologize. It doesn't have to be on social, right?
Yeah.
To anyone,
Yeah.
or to even say your contradiction that I'm changing.
Yes. Well, it's funny to me because I often think about like, for me, this is my personal opinion, but I really think that I feel shameful when I have a goal or vision and I'm like, I'm going to commit to this thing and I fall through on it. And I feel so much shame that then I don't even want to try it again. It's like self-sabotage. Like for me in my life, a lot of times it's health, where I'm like, I'm going to eat super clean. I'm going to do this. I'm going to like, and then the minute I like reach for a DQ dilly bar, which dilly bars are really good from Dairy Queen, just in case you want to know, when I was pregnant. Anyways,
Your face just lit up as well.
when I reach for a dilly bar, I'm like, oh, I'm not living into who I said I was. And I feel this like immense guilt and shame. And we all kind of put ourselves on these shame cycles where it's like we get inspired, we overcommit, then we fall through, then we feel guilt, then we feel shame, then we get inspired, and we keep doing this over and over and over again. And the problem isn't that we aren't following through on our commitments. The problem is that we're not seeing that even small progress is progress. And like for me, I have to build up my belief. And I do that by these micro actions and by like the tiniest commitments that move me closer. Like I would rather inch my way to a dream than try to sprint and burn out. And I feel like I live my life like that. Like even when I plan out my work and stuff, it's like, let me just inch closer, because I know that if I burn out, I'm done. Like I will lose my passion. I will lose my excitement. And so we forget that like any progress is still progress, and we hold ourselves to these impossible standards, and then we get down on ourselves when you don't follow through on them. And so I really think if we like asked anyone, like, what are you feeling guilty about in your life right now? It would be things that we told ourselves we would do, but we weren't able to follow through.
I love that you said, it really stuck with me. Maybe this is the name of your next book. No pressure.
Yeah.
Inch closer.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all about mindset. What are the words I'm going to use in moments of struggle? That's it. Like, I don't judge myself on having the thoughts. I don't judge myself on feeling down or feeling defeated. It's just, what am I going to do when I get there?
Yep.
Inch closer is freaking powerful.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that as well. That's so good. Because in moments where I feel like I should have done this, I should have done that, the shoulds, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell myself, but Lisa, you inches closer.
Yeah. Just a tiny bit. It's funny, when I was in the book writing process, and if you read my book, the epilogue is my favorite part. The story of the massage therapist and the mouse.
Yes, I was so happy you put that in the book.
I know, and you'll have to read it too. That is my favorite part. Like when I got to read that for the audiobook, I was like, oh. Anyways, this massage therapist was a part of my life throughout the book process. And I remember I went to see her to get a massage, and I was in the writing stages. And she said, I keep envisioning this tree. She goes, imagine, like, you wouldn't want to sit a chair in front of a tree and watch it grow, because what's above ground looks the same. But what's underground is these roots digging deeper and strengthening and inching out and spreading. And she goes, no one would really want to sit and watch a tree. But the real growth isn't there for the people. The real growth is underneath. And I feel like nowadays we share so much of our lives or our goals or things online, the visible things, that things can look really good, but they can feel awful. And I want to be like a tree, like slow growth and deep roots. Like I want the kind of growth that people can't see, but they can experience. They can feel it. And I think that's the real kind of growth we desire in our lives, but it's not shiny. It's not shareable. But it's the kind of growth that like literally gives you that peace, like that feeling like when you're with someone and you're like, oh, they're just grounded. They know who they are. It's a beautiful feeling. And that's the kind of growth that I think that we need to start shifting to in this world that's so connected but lonely, in this world that is so beautiful but broken. It's like we're just craving like deeper roots, but we're not necessarily willing to like let the process of that happen.
Click here right now to learn how the hell you get back up when you've fallen to your knees.
I believe that this is that moment where life is trying to say, and you lost. And I thought, who could I be for myself and my future self if I thought, no, this is when the phoenix rises.